This is a call to order of the April 7th, 2021 regular meeting of the Ducktown Council. At this time, I'd like to welcome a couple of guests. Number one, Dr. Jack Bagwell, the president of the College of Elmar, and Tim Sweeney, the dean of the College of Elmar Dale campus. We'll hear from them in a few minutes. And seeing we just welcomed them, I'd ask them if they would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. At starting, I'd like to do a roll call of the council and our manager and attorneys. This is Don Kingston, Mayor.
Monica Thibodeau, Mayor Pro Tem.
Rob Mooney, Council.
Nancy Cavanis, Council.
Sandy, we can't hear you.
Oh, there he is.
Danny Whitman, Council.
Drew Havens, Town Manager.
Robert Hobbs, Town Attorney.
And also with us tonight, we have Lori Ackerman, our town clerk, Kay Nickens, our deputy town clerk, Chief Black, our fire chief, Chief Ackerman, our police chief, Joe Hurd, the director of community development, Christian Legner, our PIO, and Betsy Trimble, our assistant PIO. This time we're going to go to item number 2, public comments. We have none come in, but if anybody on the floor would like to address the council, please come forth to the podium. State your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anybody here from the First Flight Rotary Club? There being no one, we'll close public comments. Going into the consent agenda. Tonight, the consent agenda contains the minutes for the February 17th, 18th, 2021 annual retreat, the minutes from the March 3rd, 2021 regular meeting, Resolution 21-02, a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Duck, North Carolina, declaring the month of April as Child Abuse Prevention Month, Resolution 21-03, a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Duck, North Carolina, declaring May 9th to 15th, 2021 as Thanks to Outer Banks Week. Authorize the town manager to execute a contract extension with Crowder Golf for disaster debris management removal services, with the extension commencing on July 1st, 2021 and terminating on June 30th, 2022. Authorize the town manager to execute 2 agreements with DEC Associates, Inc., the financial advisory services related to the upcoming beach nourishment project financing. Contract with Coastal Protection Engineering, a year 4 post-construction beach monitoring service and pre-construction services for 2022 beach nourishment, and certain budget amendments. And with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve is presented.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor?
No, there was a lot in our consent agenda this month, but I think it all is very standard, and I support the motion.
There being no further discussion, we'll do a roll call vote. Mayor votes aye. Mayor Pro Tem Thibodeau?
Aye.
Councilmember Mooney?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanis?
Aye.
Councilmember Whitman?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. At this time, we have some special presentations, first being Employee Service Recognition Program. And at this time, I would like to ask our town manager, Drew Havens, and Fire Chief Donna Black to go to the podium. As everyone knows, the town implemented many years ago an employee recognition program where we recognize employees on 5-year intervals with a certificate and a gift certificate of a choice of a duck business. And tonight we're very pleased to recognize our fire chief, 15 years of service with the town of Duck. And with this, I'll ask Drew if he'll make the presentation to Chief Black.
My honor to do that, Mayor. This is from the town of Duck, presented to Donna Black in recognition of 15 years of service. Congratulations. Thank you for your service.
Congratulations once again, Chief. And celebrating tonight her 5-year anniversary, I'd like to ask Christian Legner, our PIO, to come forth with Betsy Trimble, our Assistant PIO.
Time flies, huh?
Yeah, I'll tell you.
That's amazing.
Betsy does a fabulous job, and it's super exciting that she is getting her 5-year award.
I know, time flies.
Congratulations, Betsy. Now we'll go to item 4B, special presentations. Once again, I welcome President Dr. Jack Bagwell from the College of Albemarle, and Tim Sweeney, Dean of the College of Albemarle Manuel campus. Dr. Bagwell, Tim?
Well, thank you so much for having us this evening. I appreciate the time, and I understand we have 10 minutes, 15 at the most. Is that true? No? I'm not sure what I have, so
Spoken like a well professor.
hey, you give the president the floor, and you better watch out. So you better put a time limit, dig those ditches for me. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing, what we've got going on. Tim, if you would pass those out. Let me have one before you do, please. Thank you.
Hi,
Tim
how are
is
you?
the dean of our Dare County campus. We are the Regions
Great to
College.
see you.
We
Good
are
to
a
see you.
community college in the 58 college system of North Carolina. And we serve the 7 counties of the Albemarle region. So we have 7 counties as a service area, and that is the largest number of counties in any of the 58 colleges. So we serve a vast geographic area, but also a very diverse area, as you all know. So I've been in place since December of 19, and obviously all of my experience has been in a COVID year. So I have no idea what normal really looks like at the college, but we've been very, very active. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we've got going on, some of the impact that we have in your area and in the region, and then talk a little bit about our new project that we've got going on, and invite Dean Sweeney to say a couple of words as I drone on for a little bit. So what you have in your hands is an impact report. We started publishing these this year. This is the first one. And so when I come and do presentations like this, I want you to see what College of the Albemarle is doing in Dare County. Obviously, we publish one of these for each of our counties, but if you look at the number of students, if you open it up, we'll give you a few stories about students and some other things and how much community support we have here in Dare County. But look at the number of students served. We have a tremendous impact on the students of Dare County. Number of degrees awarded, the financials are there, and the employment. We have 112 employees that call Dare County home, and salaries of $1.7 million paid. So we're a pretty big employer in our 7 counties also. But the reality is we are obviously trying to grow enrollment at our COA Dare campus and across our 4 campuses and our 7 counties. And we are proud to be the #1 RN nursing program in North Carolina, and that includes Duke University, Chapel Hill, the universities, and the community colleges. And so that's one rating agency. You guys know how it is in Duck. It's nice to be listed on those places that people are going and people that you're paying attention to and the programs that are at #1. And so we're proud of that. I obviously mentioned it, but we're not chasing enrollment and we're not chasing rankings. We're chasing student success. So we're all about the individual lives that are transformed and the trajectories of families that are changed by what we do on our main campus, at our Edenton-Chewan campus, at our Currituck campus, and our COA Dare campus. So we've got a lot going on, and I'm not going to try to go over all of this. I just want you to have it. I want you to be able to reference this. If you want some more of these for other purposes, let us know. But we want you to know, as a stakeholder of COA, what we're up to, how we're spending the money, how we are raising support for activities in Dare County. Speaking of raising support, I will say also that we are in the middle of a capital campaign, and part of that is to furnish the new building that, if you look on the back, you'll see a picture, but we'll show you some more images of our COA Dare campus that's coming up. And will be online, hopefully December, January of this winter, this upcoming winter. But we have asked our COA Foundation, a separate arm, a separate 501c3 organization, to help us raise money. They have dedicated $1.1 million, and I've agreed to raise $1.2 million to help us put furniture, fixtures, equipment, have money in the bank so that we can do emerging programs, look at what we can modify both at COA Dare, at Currituck, and then our other facilities. And I'm proud to say that we're about a third of the way to our goal in a COVID year, and we haven't even turned it to the public phase yet. So we've had three six-figure gifts thus far, and if Tim will hold this up, he's going to be my Vanna White today. So I don't know, where's the camera? So, but this is, if you'll just hold it up here, these are some renderings, and unfortunately, you know, we could pass them around, I suppose. But we've identified some spaces that folks can donate money to, have named after the individuals or their companies. And you see that we have Veterans Memorial Hall already named. That's an anonymous gift. We have some that are pending for $25,000. We've got another six-figure gift that we're talking to somebody about in a couple of weeks. So we've got a lot going on, a lot of interest and a lot of support. And we're doing the same thing in Currituck. That building, by the way, will come online this summer. So we've got about 50,000 square feet of new space. We're making a case for another 20,000 square foot facility in Pasquotank. So we are in the middle of a transformation at the college. And again, it's not about buildings, it's not about furniture, it's certainly not about fixtures, it's about what we can do to influence the success of our students through those activities. So we got a lot of stuff going on. Dean Sweeney's always active on the Outer Banks and out here in Dare, and certainly in other parts of the campus or the college. And we are proud of the work that we have done and that we are doing. So, talking quickly, and again, remember, presidents take the microphone and keep on keeping on. Deans do too, by the way, which is why I'm not letting him up here to speak. But let's go through some of this very quick. And I think you can see that this will change the landscape of Manteo. Manteo is beautiful, it's quaint, and the town of Manteo is certainly involved in this planning along with Dare County. But you'll see that from the south side of the building here, we have an amphitheater. We have sort of a quad that's forming. This is where the middle school was. We've torn that down and raised that. The professional arts building that you know on that campus is going to be standing still and will be actually modified to match some of the look that you see with the new building. And I'm going to flip through this very quickly, but you see it is very striking. And that the architects like to use what they call the vernacular of the region, and they'll take on some things that you might see in Manteo, and it borrows from the lighthouses in pieces. And when you go in, it'll certainly have some ambiance of being here on the coast. But it's going to be a fantastic place for our students, but also a community place. There's a lot of spaces here that community can gather. Manteo's talking about developing a 10-foot wide, I believe it is, walkway lighted between our campus and downtown so that it is a corridor for people to travel and be involved and have events in the amphitheater and walk downtown to get dinner or whatever the case may be. But you see that it is, from this aerial view, that the campus is developing, and we hope that it will continue to be something that we draw students and use the DARE guarantee to the utmost and fullest to make sure our students stay around and at least get started at College of the Albemarle, which coincidentally is the first comprehensive community college in North Carolina. There are a lot of firsts that came with this part of the country, right? And community college here started with College of the Albemarle. But you see that the space is modern, it's inviting, it's attractive, and we think it will be certainly something that our students and our community can be proud of. But you also see that we have some college transfer degrees, so people can get started in the college transfer route. They can go from College of the Albemarle to wherever they want to go, frankly. And we regularly see students, of course, going to North Carolina universities, but we have folks going to Harvard, Yale, Columbia, other places as well. And then scholarship funding grants, we have obviously the federal and state grants. Whoops, what did I just do? Once upon a time, I used to be a techie guy, then I became an administrator, and I forgot how to do everything. So how did I get out of the presentation? Do what now?
You're good.
Oh, I'm back. I'm not back here. So drive, Dean. So we obviously have a lot of things going on, and I'll stand by the microphone here. The Dare Guarantee is something that we're particularly excited about, the $250,000, thank you, $250,000 a year going to help students to continue their education and get started. I was telling Dean Sweeney that we had some interviews at the state level where people are very interested in making that something that is found outside of just Dare, and that they can replicate the successes of that. And frankly, we hope that we can bring that to the other 6 counties in some way, shape, or form. So Dare continues to lead the way. And then, of course, here in the Outer Banks, you have the Outer Banks Community Foundation. We have COA Cares, which is something that we have internally, which we really need to do a better job of raising money to this. These are students, remember, community colleges serve those who are most impacted by changes in the environment. We have first generation. We have people that if they have a $100 repair bill on their car, it can mean the difference in continuing in school or not. So we have COA Cares, where our community steps up and provides resources for students to pay rent one time, or to help them buy groceries, or to meet a need. And our foundation has continued to support that. In fact, yesterday added money to the kitty for that because we have run out of money this year, and we continue to have students with high need. So obviously it wasn't just me. Something's going on here. And, suffice it to say, I'll just wrap up with, we have a lot of opportunity here in Dare County. The college is 60 years old. We've done a tremendous effort. We're proud of the excellence that we have today, but we've been an excellent college for 60 years. And with the resources that Dare County, Currituck County, Pasquotank County, Chowan County, and our other counties continue to provide for us, the future is bright. And we hope that with all of the things that have gone on this year, as we come back for fall of 21, we hope it looks more like fall of 19 than fall of 20. And we're really gearing back up with students to be back on campus. Our faculty and staff are coming back. Our activities are coming back. And we're excited about where we are and the things that are going on across our platform, but especially here at COA Dare. And you'll hear me say COA Dare, COA Edenton Chowan, COA Elizabeth City, because we want to make sure that first it's COA. We're one college, 7 counties, 4 campuses, and one outcome that we're trying to achieve, and that's student success for everybody who steps foot through the door. Dean Sweeney, you want to close us out?
Thank you, Dr. Bagwell. It's good to be back here. Don and I were talking a little bit about the last time I was here is pre-COVID, so it's nice to be out here to see you all and not by Zoom. So I'm excited not only for the new campus, but we have really expanded our programs here at the Dare campus and throughout the college, of course, as Dr. Bagwell said. Just as pre-COVID, we had marine diesel engine repair. Our HVAC is really grown with a dual enrollment. Our welding program, new welding lab, I think Dr. Bagwell, we put in almost over $200,000 into that. Have a waiting list still for the welding, and looking at Monica over there, I've always told you that when our current TV meetings, and Nancy's on there now. Thank you, Nancy, I'm the chairman, by the way.
Oh, cool, I miss it.
I don't know how that happened, Monica, but anyway, we're expanding now with electrical, plumbing, construction, I just recently met with John Harris with Kitty Hawk Kites, and we're going to be doing sales and retail. Also, small engine repair. I'm in discussions with Manio Marine, and they're very excited because they're right close by the college. So it's a perfect laboratory for us to teach at the new building and then proceed down to the street down there to the Manio Marina. So those just are some of the things, and we're also looking into the nonprofit training. As you all know, our nonprofits are our strength down here in the Outer Banks. Excuse me, allergies. But the nonprofits have just really supported us with the hurricanes and, of course, with COVID. And they've reached out and to me as a dean and to the college, and we're working right now together to try to help those nonprofits to, really, how do you run a nonprofit? And so we're going to be looking at that too. So we're looking really at this campus and also the Currituck campus, so close to us. That's going to be our public service and health sciences, where our BLET and our fire will be down there. That campus opens up, I believe, in June, right?
Yeah, this fall we'll be programming.
So this fall. So we're excited about that. I'm here as a dean to talk to the public and talk to you all. Dr. Bagwell said it the best. I need your help to get students in the building and also, to help them get that short-term training. And I say short-term because the industry out here with the Outer Banks builders, they're looking for us to establish an electrical short-term training and then put them in an apprenticeship. And the apprenticeships at the welding level with the ferry division has gone over very well. HVAC companies are doing the same thing. We're looking at that with plumbing, electrical, and construction. So let's get the word out to our young people, to our adult population, especially after this COVID. We could get them back into short-term training, and they're taking them out of the classrooms, everybody. They're taking them right out of the classrooms, and they're employed right away. So, Mayor, thank you for having us. Drew, thank you for inviting us. I'll be working closely, continue with you down the road, okay? Thank you again for having us.
Any questions for us before we yield the floor?
Yeah, I have a question for you, Doctor. Is there any future plan for dormitories or any type of housing? I know that's always an issue
We don't
in
have
Dare
any
County.
current plans. We've had some discussions about that. It's pretty uncommon for a community college in North Carolina to have dormitories, but that's something that's been mentioned, and we've not said no to that. So right now we're trying to open these buildings, and then we'll figure out what comes next. But it hasn't been something that's been on the radar, at least.
Great question. Thank you so much for all you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having us tonight. Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, Doctor.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Dean. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
This must be the mascot. This is the mascot. So cute.
All right, going on to item number 5, public hearings. I'd like to say a few words about the first one that's scheduled. As soon as I find my notes, we'll be all set. Joe, do you happen to have the write-up on that? I know I had it. Thank you, Joe. Just an update on the public hearing that we had last month. Within 24 hours following the initial public hearing on March 3rd, 2021, business and property owner Phil Morgan with the Sea Green Gallery submitted written comments to the town concerning the special exception application. Those comments were originally scheduled to be considered by the town council as of April 7th, 2021, this evening, during a second public hearing. During the week prior to April 7th council meeting, the town of Duck received written requests from both applicant Belinda Plava and Mr. Morgan to defer the council consideration of Mr. Morgan's written comments until the town council public meeting on September 1st, 2021. So with that, I would like to ask Mayor Pro Temp if she would read a motion to defer this until September 1st.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to offer a motion that the town council defer consideration of Mr. Morgan's written comments and the execution of the special exception permit until the September 1st, 2021 town council meeting.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor? There being none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mayor votes aye. Mayor Pro Tem Thibodeau?
Aye.
Councilmember Mooney?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanis? Aye. Councilmember Whitman? You're muted, Wally. Go ahead. Aye. Thanks, Sandy. Motion passes 5-0. So delayed. Going to the second public hearing discussion consideration of SC 21-002, an application by Robin Kokolis, Gail Healy, Jennifer Tolson, and Suzanne Proctor for a special exception to allow fill in excess of 3 feet of residential lots located at 111 and 113 Bayberry Drive. This time I'd like to turn over to our town attorney, Robert Hobbs.
Thank you, Mayor. At this time, we will open the quasi-judicial hearing. When considering an application for a special exception, the town council sits as a quasi-judicial body. Therefore, certain safeguards must be instituted in order to give the applicant a fair hearing. The applicant has the right to cross-examine witnesses and offer rebuttal evidence. The procedure of the ordinance must be followed. The council members may question any witness at any time during the hearing. Questions from the floor will not be permitted except by cross-examination from any of the sworn witnesses once recognized to speak. A member must not vote on the application if the outcome of the matter being considered is reasonably likely to have a direct and substantial financial impact on the member. If such a direct and substantial financial conflict exists, the member should disclose it at this time and ask to be excused from consideration of the matter. If any of the members present have had any contact with anyone prior to the hearing in which the particulars of the application were discussed, or if you have received letters, email messages, phone calls, or other contact from anyone concerning this matter prior to this hearing, you must base your decision on this application entirely on the facts presented during this hearing and disregard the particulars discussed with the applicant or another party. A member must base his or her decision on the evidence presented during this hearing. Any member who has developed a predetermined opinion or bias on the outcome of this application before the hearing must not participate in the decision on this application. Crucial facts used to determine the outcome of this hearing must be based on sworn statements made by witnesses during this hearing. While you may be presented before or during this hearing with copies of unsworn statements such as letters, emails, and the like, such unsworn evidence can only be used to corroborate or supplement other sworn evidence presented during this hearing. Unsworn evidence, such as letters and emails, can never be used as the sole basis for your decision. At this time, the town clerk will swear in the applicant and all witnesses who plan to provide testimony or evidence in this case. So if you may or might say something, you'll need to be sworn at this time, please.
How do you want me to do this with them remotely?
Oh, they're doing remotely?
Okay.
Okay.
So raise your right hand, and after I give the oath, say, I do or I swear. I swear that the statements I'm about to make are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Swear.
They're muted.
Can you say your name if you agree? You do or you swear? There we go. Yeah.
Is there a third person?
No, that's Sam.
I guess it, okay. Okay, now we'll turn the hearing over to Joe Hurd, who will make a presentation on behalf of the town staff.
Thank you, Mr. Hobbs. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Kingston, members of council, members of the public in attendance this evening. As was outlined for you, we do have a special exception application before us this evening. The primary property that this application addresses is at 111 Bayberry Drive, but we do have the owners at 113 Bayberry Drive participating in this hearing, and they did submit a concurrent application because some of the proposal impacts that property as well. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So before we get into the details, did want to point out for the record that this public hearing was properly noticed in the Coastland Times. Notices sent to adjoining property owners, sign posted on the property, as well as notice here at Town Hall and on the town's website. All of that in accordance with legal advertising requirements. So this application before you this evening is a special exception permit for fill in excess of 3 feet in height on the subject property. The applicant is seeking the special exception to add as much as 10 feet of fill in depth at the deepest parts of the property. As explained in some of the materials you have in your packets, this lot initially, it appears that at some point in its history had been used as a borrow pit, where there was a lot of sand taken out of this to create this large bowl, is the best way to describe it. Some of the council members may recall almost exactly a year ago today, you had an application before you for the adjoining lot at 113 Bayberry Drive. That lot was actually, a good portion of that lot was actually higher than this lot. So this is even lower and deeper throughout most of the lot. Again, as much as 10 feet lower than, the elevations you see on the surrounding properties, 12 feet lower than the road, the adjoining roadway there. So significantly deeper than that. And that's really the main rationale behind the request you have before you this evening is adding this fill to develop an appropriate building pad for this property. So the property, and looking at the aerial photograph we have before us this evening, is about a 1/4 acre in size, a little over 10,000 square feet. You can see on the map there the proximity to the adjoining property to the east that did receive approval to add some additional fill last year. But you can see everything around it is all developed as single-family residential, and it is zoned in that manner as well. So you have existing residences on all sides. Just stepping back again to that, the prior application in 2020, the town council at that meeting had voted unanimously to grant approval of fill, and in that instance, the fill that was necessary was only up to about 5 feet, because that fill that was approved tapers down as it heads westward toward this property that we're looking at tonight. So part of the application, as we look at the, some of the elevations there, we can look at that for reference if we need to. But this is really the key thing that we're looking at here, is the cross-section of this proposal. And what you see there in that red line is there's the 2 properties. And so on the left of this, you have the subject property. So you see a deeper amount of fill there, again, approximately 10 feet at its deepest. But you can see how that stretches across, and at a certain point, and I'll see if I can, if that comes up or not on here. No. Okay, there's a certain point at which it intersects with the fill on the other lot, and rather than creating a situation where you have a level building pad goes down into a ditch or swale and then goes back up onto the adjoining lot. The proposal the applicants are presenting to you is that they just be allowed to level that off across both lots. So in other words, the subject property and elevation would be the same as the properties, the prior approval property from last year, and it just go consistently straight across. That is why that other property kicks in on this application, because they were not approved to add that additional fill. But with this project coming online now, it seems to make more sense to attempt to do that straight across in that manner. So in evaluating these types of applications, the council's asked to look at a series of findings that you're asked to consider and make regarding a special exception for fill. The first of those is if the site for the proposed fill is otherwise adequate in size, shape, and other characteristics to accommodate the proposed project. In this instance, and evaluating this, the staff found that the property certainly seems to have, it's over 10,000 square feet, which is non-conforming with our current standard, but certainly we have hundreds and hundreds of properties throughout the town that are that size, that have been developed over the years, and would certainly allow for a residence and all of the associated improvements that a property owner could look at there. So we didn't see any issues in particular with potential building setbacks, lot coverage, parking, or any of the other things that would present issues for a lot. So we found that the application did meet that first finding. Second, the applicant has demonstrated the requirements are unreasonable or impractical due to the necessity for the fill, lot shape, topographic features, location of vegetation, or other characteristics. And in this instance, as we pointed out, this lot, just again, due to some of the historical activity on it with the removal of a significant amount of fill dirt, has created a bowl. And in looking at, where a typical or likely building pad would be located, it would be sitting in the bottom of that bowl, 12 feet down from the road, literally over an entire story in height down in the pit. So in addition to just presenting a very awkward facade to the street, should it be built at that level, there are other issues that the property owner needs to consider here relating to stormwater. You've got all these other adjoining properties at a much higher level, so this property is the one that would gather all of that stormwater in this bowl, and certainly seems it is at a relatively high elevation overall, but compared to the adjoining properties, it could become a collection point for stormwater that could cause problems should the lot be developed at its current elevation. So staff did find that for these reasons, there did appear to be a legitimate physical hardship and concerns about what development would be like if, and the impacts it would have if it was developed at the current elevation. So we did see a hardship in terms of allowing additional fill to improve those hardships. Third item, amount of fill proposed is the minimum necessary to accommodate the proposed project. This one's a little bit difficult because it's hard to say that if there's a magic number that, at such and such an elevation, it's appropriate, but a foot below that, it's not. So in looking at and evaluating this finding, what the staff did was just take a look at whether this was a reasonable request. Is what the applicant proposing something that's above and beyond what they really need to make this a functional building lot? So some of the things we looked at with that are, in this instance, they are proposing to have this at the same elevation as the adjoining lot. It's a very similar elevation to the lot that would be just to the west of this that's developed. It is a lower elevation than the actual roadway itself, so it's not going to be shedding stormwater onto the road when it's all said and done. And it's a lower elevation than the properties at the back or to the rear. There are some properties in the Salt Air subdivision that this property abuts at the rear. So with that in mind, it didn't appear that they're asking to do anything above and beyond what was reasonable or something that was creating a greater challenge for the adjoining properties. So it brings it more in line with the other properties, but didn't seem to go above that. So with that, staff found that it met finding number 3. Fourth, the proposed fill will not negatively impact adjacent properties or the surrounding area. For many of the same reasons I just mentioned, staff found that in this case, it did not appear that there would be anything resulting from this project that would damage or otherwise harm other properties. In fact, if this is granted, as I mentioned toward the beginning, it would be much more consistent with the appearance and characteristics of this neighborhood than having to build a house down at a lower elevation. So we found that finding 4 was met. Finding 5 has to do with consistency with the town's adopted CAMA land use plan and vision statement. We have some analysis for the council there regarding that, a little more detailed analysis, but I'll just summarize that by saying the planning board did evaluate those and found that the proposed project and requested special exception are consistent with both of those documents. Finally, the 6th item, the applicant submitted a drainage plan consistent with requirements. The applicants did retain engineer Dwight Emery to prepare the grading plan and topographic information, some of which is included in your packets. And they show how the proposed fill and grading will minimize the impacts on the surrounding properties. So again, we found that that finding was met as well. So all that being the case, at their meeting on March the 10th, 2021, the planning board members voted unanimously to recommend approval of this special exception for the design and depth of the fill proposed for the properties at 111 and 113 Bayberry Drive, subject to the following condition. And the board has recommended a condition that the applicant must submit required application materials and obtain a land disturbance permit prior to commencing the fill and grading work. Mayor, that concludes my presentation, but I'd certainly be glad to answer any questions the council members have at this time.
I have a question. Thank you, Joe. Question I had is, I'm sure it's been considered by the staff and the planning board, but the stability of that amount of fill when you put when you sink pilings into it, is there some kind of a length of time that you have to wait for it to sort of settle, or is there any concern whatsoever that that extensive amount of fill would render a building unstable?
I mean, it's a reasonable question. I'm not aware of a particular requirement related to that as far as that being a particular issue or concern. Mr. Emery, the engineer, has been working with the applicants, presumably has looked at that, but at this point, there's not until we have a building permit proposal, we don't really get into those types of issues. All we're looking at right now is the fill itself, and we don't have an actual building permit application where that type of issue would be considered.
Okay, great. I noticed that when I drove by the site, that the other property is undeveloped, and it was, as you said, it wasn't as much fill, but I mean, it's just sitting there undeveloped, and I wasn't sure if it needed to sit for a while before you could build on it. So that was just a question I had. And then the only other question was on the drawing that you showed a minute ago on the other slide, which was where it notated that on the adjoining property, it says area previously approved. And was that just because we had to taper it when we did that approval last year? We couldn't just end it, so, but conceivably, they would have been able to go to the edge of their property had we were butting up to something other than just nothing, right? Is that how that worked?
Correct. Yeah, so what you see on this drawing is that the left half of the drawing is the primary lot that we're talking about tonight, at 111. The right half of that drawing is the lot at 113. So the reason that tapers down, again, is simply because at that point in time, the subject property at 111 was just a vacant property, and so they did have to taper down at a 3-to-1 slope to comply with the town standards. At that time, the owner was not in a position or ready to do this where they could be submitted as together as a combined proposal. But this proposal that you have tonight really effectively does that. And that's the primary reason why the other lot is still sitting there. They have not completed and gotten a final approval on that fill, even though the bulk of it was completed a couple of months ago. More than likely, when it's all said and done, that lot is going to end up being lower than it is sitting today. Just eyeballing it, it does appear that it's higher than the elevation that was approved. But that's going to be going down. But part of that, again, the benefit of tying this together is that some of that fill that may have to be pushed, skimmed off the top there, can simply be pushed into this other property and involve a little less expense for the owner at 111.
Thank you. It is really an unusually deep lot. Thank you.
Any other questions for Joe?
Yes, I do. What is the amount of fill? Everybody says approximately 10 feet. What is the amount of fill that's going in there at the deepest location? Is it coming up even with the road? I'm looking at the lot number 1, which is 113. And that was when it was, if I remember correctly, when we did that, it was approximately 2 to 3 foot below the roadway. What is the finished elevation for the 2 lots going to be?
Finished elevation is outlined in the staff report at 28 feet.
That's correct, Joe, but
above mean sea level, which is approximately 2 feet below the elevation of the road.
okay, that's,
You're looking at that for comparison.
thank you.
Other questions for Joe? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Joe. At this point, I will ask if either of the applicants here this evening would like to address the council during this hearing.
I'm fine unless you have any other questions. This is Gail Keeley. This is Robin Colas. I don't think I really have anything that I can add to this unless you have questions.
I just have one question for you, for both of you. As you know, we're holding this quasi-judicial hearing during a pandemic and during what we consider what is statutorily called a remote meeting, and that means one of the council members is attending remotely. So the law that was passed to accommodate this situation still requires that the applicant be guaranteed certain rights with regard to having this hearing during a remote meeting. So I'd like to ask you whether both of you attending as applicants agree to waive any objection to any non-compliance with the statutory requirements for holding this hearing during a remote meeting, including your right to a hearing and decision as occurring during the emergency. Secondly, that all persons subject to the proceeding who have standing to participate in the hearing have been given notice of the hearing and consent to the fact that we're having a remote meeting during the emergency. And third, that all due process rights of the parties have been protected. So in other words, if you agree that, that your rights have been addressed in those three ways, if you can let us know if you agree with that.
I do too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Hobbs, for the record, Ms. Kokolas is the owner of 111 Bayberry. Ms. Healy is one of the owners at 113 Bayberry,
Okay.
for the record.
Perfect. Thank you. So at this point, I will ask if there are any remaining questions, either from the applicants or from council members about this application, or from any other sworn witness before we close the public hearing, and then the council will then deliberate on the application. Okay, hearing none, then we will go ahead and close the public hearing. And at this point, the council may deliberate. And when you're ready to proceed, if you're inclined to make a motion to approve, then I have a written motion that I can read for you that incorporates the fact that this is being held during a remote meeting during the emergency and incorporates the wording about the 24-hour comment period.
Thank you, Robert. Any further deliberation by council?
No.
There being none, Robert, if you would read the motion, then I'll identify a council member to make it.
Thank you. I make a motion that the application for special exception number SE-21-02 be approved, including the adoption of the proposed findings of fact set forth in the staff report with respect to the compliance with the required special exception criteria and including the conditions recommended, if any, by the planning board as set forth in the staff report. The council also finds that the quasi-judicial hearing that was conducted in this case met all the requirements of the Town of Duck Code of Ordinances and North Carolina General Statutes, including Section 166A-19.24F of the North Carolina General Statutes that pertains to holding a quasi-judicial hearing held during a remote council meeting. The mayor and clerk are authorized to execute a special exception permit that is prepared by town staff consistent with this resolution, provided, however, that if the town receives any written public comments on the subject of the quasi-judicial public hearing within 24 hours after the time that the hearing was closed, the action taken under this motion shall be suspended and delayed until the next meeting of the council for consideration of the public comments and further action if necessary. Otherwise, absent the town's receipt of any further written public comments within 24 hours, no further action by this council will be necessary to give effect to the approval of the special exception.
Thank you, Robert. Council member would like to make the motion?
I'll make that motion. Is that what we're asking? Yep. Yes, I'll make the motion read by Robert Hobbs.
Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? No. There being none, we'll do a roll call vote. The mayor votes aye. Mayor Pro Tem Thibodeau?
Aye.
Councilmember Mooney?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavaness?
Aye.
Councilmember Whitman? Aye. The motion passes 5-0. Thank you, ladies, for attending.
Thank you.
Going on to the next public hearing discussion consideration of CUP 21-001, an application by Doug Kraus for a conditional use permit to establish a 28-seat restaurant in the Village Commercial District in the Scarborough Lane Shopping Center at 1171 Duck Road. Now, with this, I'd like to turn over to our town attorney, Robert Hobbs.
Thank you, Mayor. At this time, we will open the quasi-judicial hearing. When considering an application for a special exception, the town council sits as a quasi-judicial body. Therefore, certain safeguards must be instituted in order to give the applicant a fair hearing. The applicant has the right to cross-examine witnesses and offer rebuttal evidence. The procedure of the ordinance must be followed. The council members may question any witness at any time during the hearing. Questions from the floor will not be permitted except by cross-examination from any of the sworn witnesses once recognized to speak. A member must not vote on the application if the outcome of the matter being considered is reasonably likely to have a direct and substantial financial impact on the member. If such a direct and substantial financial conflict exists, the member should disclose it at this time and ask to be excused from consideration of the matter. If any of the members present have had any contact with anyone prior to this hearing in which the particulars of the application were discussed, or if you have received letters, email messages, phone calls, or other contact from anyone concerning this matter prior to this hearing, you must base your decision on this application entirely on the facts presented during this hearing and disregard the particulars discussed with the applicant or another party. A member must base his or her decision on the evidence presented during this hearing. Any member who has developed a predetermined opinion or bias on the outcome of this application before the hearing must not participate in this decision on this application. Crucial facts used to determine the outcome of this hearing must be based on sworn statements made by witnesses during this hearing. While you may be presented before or during this hearing with copies of unsworn statements contained in letters, emails, and the like, such unsworn evidence can only be used to corroborate or supplement other sworn evidence presented during this hearing. Unsworn evidence, such as letters and emails, can never be used as the sole basis for your decision. At this time, the town clerk will swear in the applicant and all witnesses who plan to provide testimony or evidence in this case. So if you plan to speak or you might speak, please be sworn at this time.
Those wishing to speak, please stand. Raise your right hand, and after I give the oath, say I do or I swear. I swear that the statements I'm about to make are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
At this time, I will turn it over to Joe Hurd to make a presentation on behalf of the town staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hobbs. Again, I'll start just outlining for the record that this public hearing was properly noticed, advertised in the Coastland Times. Hearing notices sent to all adjoining property owners and applicant, sign posted on the property, and notice posted here at the town hall and on the town's website. So what we were looking at this time is a conditional use permit application for a proposal to convert an existing retail space in the Scarborough Lane shops into a 28-seat restaurant, units C4 and C9 of the shopping center. So we have an aerial photo here, also have a site plan that we'll reference, but this shows the area we're looking at here containing the Scarborough Lane shops. One of the things that I was interested in finding out myself as I ran across this is that the property is actually two parcels, not one, that was developed in two phases over time. So, but as it sits right now, Scarborough Lane Shops covers an area almost 4 acres in size. There are 4 elevated buildings, sort of 2 in a first phase toward the front, 2 in the second phase where these units are located. And in total encompasses almost 30,000 square feet and 34 commercial units in that development. Buildings are elevated. A lot of the parking on site is actually located beneath the buildings, so a little bit unique layout for Duck in terms of that, but probably our largest single, these are certainly our largest buildings that we have if you want to look at them as a property as a whole. So in this case, you have existing units on the property being changed from retail to restaurant in this case. So the proposed restaurant with these two spaces that go from front to back, if you're familiar with how the buildings work at Scarborough Lane, this particular units, two units that were combined, stretching all the way from one side of the building to the other side in that manner. So you have in the front where you enter, you have a series of tables, again 28 seats is what's planned, and then a kitchen area for where you would have most of the staff and a lot of the customer service there as well toward the rear of the unit. So going back to this here, there's a lot of different aspects of development that the staff and planning board look at as we're looking at a proposal for a conditional use permit or site plan approval. In this instance, because we have an existing developed property, there's a lot of those things are already there. They're not proposed to change. They're not required to change as part of this development proposal. So I'm not going to go over each of the dozens of things we have outlined in the staff report there. I'll just cover that more generally by saying that things that are on this site that are not compliant with the town's current standards, such as the size of the buildings, those are existing, they're legal, non-conforming uses, they're grandfathered, they can remain. This proposal does not expand those, it does not change those things. So what I wanted to focus on was really I'll call it the only issue that was really important to consider as we were looking at this application, because it complies with everything else and in the end complies with this. But we did take a closer look at parking, because that is an issue that often comes up with a change of use in a commercial district. So in this instance, with the change from retail use to the restaurant, with the amount of seating it has, it does result in an increase of almost 2 parking spaces from the one use to the other. So that changes the overall requirements on the site from the current requirements of 165 parking spaces to 167 parking spaces. So in the big scheme of things, a relatively minor increase. But it is something we have to look at in terms of the ability of the site to accommodate that. In this instance, after reviewing plans and reviewing what exists on site, there are 176 parking spaces on site, and therefore that exceeds the amount that the site needs to have to accommodate all of the uses on site, not just this, but all of them. And therefore, this proposal is in compliance with the town's minimum parking standards, and the site still has 9 additional parking spaces above and beyond what they're required. So they're in good shape from that standpoint. So that being the case, there are a few things that the council needs to look at regarding approval of a conditional use. There's some criteria, and I'll just run down those quickly. First, the use meets all required conditions and specifications of the ordinance. As I just noted in the staff analysis, the proposed use and site appear to apply with all applicable standards of the town's zoning ordinance. So they meet that finding 1. Secondly, the use does not materially endanger the public health or safety. In this instance, the applicants have already received, we have times when they'll come before us before they've gone through some of the other steps. In this case, the applicants have already gone to the Dare County Environmental Health Department and received approval for the restaurant. They have obviously are evaluating the septic requirements and the current system, and they have issued a permit approving the use. So they already have that in hand. In addition, I wanted to note that the proposal does not alter any of the existing character or function of this site. So we didn't see any way that it was creating additional issues or problems for either other tenants of this property or surrounding properties. And we felt that finding 2 was met. Third, the use will not substantially injure the value of adjoining property. As the proposed business is filling a vacant space and would not alter, again, the existing character or function, if anything, it's more likely that, rather than any consideration of a negative impact, this would have a positive impact as far as bringing more vitality to the site and other businesses within there. That's really one of the reasons why we have shopping centers, is so that the businesses can pull off of each other, play off each other, offer more things to a customer than a single business can. So we felt that this would have that type of benefit to the other shops in Scarborough Lane. So we found that the proposal complies with that third finding. And finally, use will be in harmony with the area in which it's located and in general conformity with the comprehensive and land use plan. In this case, we took a look at the future land use map in the comprehensive and land use plan. Property is consistent with the commercial or, Duck Village character area designation under that plan. The use being proposed is also consistent with that. And if we look at the exact wording of that plan and that district, it reads, it's characterized by a vibrant, walkable, pedestrian-friendly experience with inviting facades, charming storefronts, interest people walking by, and feature small-scale commercial, retail, and restaurants. And in light of that description and what you picture as I read that, the proposed change of use certainly seems to be consistent with the type of business that's envisioned for this, and it is a local business. I guess we'll call it a very small chain, but they're on their way. This would be their second location for this business, so it's nice to, again, have that local flavor that the town likes to have. All that being said, the Planning Board at its public meeting on March 10th voted unanimously to recommend approval of the conditional use permit to establish a restaurant in units C4 and C9 of the Scarborough Lane Shops at 1171 Duck Road, subject to the following conditions. First, the building inspector and fire department must review and approve the proposed improvements for compliance with applicable codes. Second, any new signage must be reviewed and approved under a separate permit by the Community Development Department. And third, this conditional use permit will expire in 12 months from the date of approval if the approved change of use has not been initiated. Mayor Kingston, that concludes my presentation, but I'd be glad to answer any questions that council members have.
Questions from council?
Yeah, Joe, I have one, and maybe it's more of a curiosity question, but I assume this restaurant will have a lot of carry-out business based upon its offerings, but there's no calculations ever required for parking when it's both eat in and dine out, or takeout, I should say.
It depends on the circumstance. If you have a food service place that is purely takeout, that does nothing but that, Then we're looking at something that would be more of similar to a retail calculation in terms, in other words, they don't have the seating that the restaurant parking is based on. So so we do look at it that way if it's a use that doesn't have any. In this instance, it does have, a sizable seating area inside, and so we use that to calculate the parking.
Other questions?
No, I have none.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. I do want to apologize for reading the script for the special exception. It's the same precautions, so just want to mention that, so I apologize for that. At this point, I will call the applicant or the applicant's representative to see if they would like to make a presentation. You come up to the podium. Thank you. If you'll identify yourself.
My name is Doug Kraus with the Island Smoothie. Well, since I'm up here, I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time to hear our story. I don't have anything else to add to what Joe said, but I'm happy to answer any questions about what we're doing or what we plan to do.
Any questions for the applicant from council?
No.
I do
I
want to
just
ask.
have a cheeky one. I lived on Scarborough Lane for 21 years. Where were you? I lived on Scarborough Lane for 21 years. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish you were there.
Yeah, it looks like a nice menu.
Yeah, it looks like a great place.
I do
Look
have
forward to seeing you guys in there.
would like to go over with you what I went with on the previous application. As you know, this is a remote meeting during an emergency where we have to do things a little bit different. And so the statute that authorizes the council having a remote meeting wants to ensure that the applicants, their rights are still preserved as far as being able to have this hearing before decisions made. So basically, we're asking that if you would waive any objection to any non-compliance with the statutory requirements for holding this hearing during the emergency in a remote meeting, including your right to have the hearing and decision occur during the emergency as opposed to waiting until after the emergency, that all persons subject to the proceeding who have standing to participate have been given notice of the hearing and consent to having a remote meeting like we're having today for this decision. And then third, that all due process rights of the parties were protected. So I just want to make sure that you understood those and that you agree that all those protections were still afforded to you despite the fact that we have an emergency and we have a remote meeting.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for either the applicant or staff, or is there anyone else who's been sworn who would like to make a presentation? All right, then if not, thank you. And if not, then we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and we'll turn this over to the council to deliberate. And like we did before, I have a proposed motion that I could read if there is an inclination to approve the application.
Thank you, Robert. Any further deliberation by council?
No, it seems extremely straightforward. I think staff report was really thorough, and I have have nothing further to discuss.
Robert, if you'd read the motion.
Okay, thank you. I make a motion that the application for conditional use permit number CUP 21-001 be approved, including the adoption of the proposed findings of fact set forth in the staff report with respect to compliance with the required criteria, and including the conditions recommended by the planning board as set forth in the staff report. The council also finds that the quasi-judicial hearing that was conducted in this case met all of the requirements of the Town of Duck Code of Ordinances and the North Carolina General Statutes, including Section 166A-19.24F of the North Carolina General Statutes that pertains to quasi-judicial hearings held during a remote council meeting. the mayor and clerk are authorized to execute a conditional use permit that is prepared by town staff consistent with this resolution, provided, however, that if the town receives any written public comments on the subject of the quasi-judicial hearing within 24 hours after the time that the hearing was closed, the action taken under this motion shall be suspended and delayed until the next meeting of the council for consideration of the public comments and further action if necessary. Otherwise, absent the town's receipt of any further written public comments within 24 hours, no further action by this council will be necessary to give effect to the approval of the conditional use permit.
Thank you, Robert. I'll ask council if a member will make the motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the motion read by Robert Hobbs.
Any further comments on the motion on the floor? There being done, we'll do a roll call vote. Mayor votes aye, or Mayor Pro Tem Thibodeau?
Aye.
Councilmember Mooney?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Whitman? Aye. The motion passes 5-0. Thank you for attending, and good luck with your new business. Item number 6, old business items deferred from previous meetings. We have none at this time. Item number 7, new business, discussion consideration of appointment of a town representative to the Albemarle Commission's Regional Broadband Initiative Working Group. At this time, I'd like to turn over to our town manager, Drew Havens.
Thank you, Mayor. So in your agenda packet, you have a copy of an email we received from Michael Urban, who is the Executive Director of the Albemarle Commission. Shortly after there was the announcement that there was going to be direct funding to cities and towns as a result of the American Rescue Plan, we received this from Mr. Urban, and he'd like to put together a working group focused on broadband. Broadband, as you know, is one of those issues that affects different places in the state and country differently than others. We're very fortunate here in Duck and in Dare County in terms of the availability of high-speed internet or broadband. Other places served by the Albemarle Commission are not as fortunate. I will say it's also a goal of the North Carolina League of Municipalities to continue to advocate for better broadband access throughout the state of North Carolina. Really saw the effects of the digital divide during this pandemic, particularly when children were told to go home for school and access remotely, and they don't have broadband in order to do that. Again, not something that many of us are accustomed to because we have that available from one or more providers at our homes, but there are other places that don't. So what the commission is looking to do is form a working group to continue to advocate, particularly in the General Assembly, and then also if there are local dollars that can go towards improving broadband access throughout the region. I think they'd be working on that as well. But right now, what they're looking for is a representative from the town of Duck to be part of this working group.
Thank you, Drew. First, I'd like to start and see if any council member would like to step forward. Nancy has stepped forward. Any other council member interested?
Awesome. That'd be great. No, you go.
I can't pretend that I know a ton about it, but I'm really interested in being part of this.
If there's no objection, Nancy will be a representative to the
That's great.
new working group. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy.
Robert, we don't need a motion on that behalf, do we?
I think the minutes can just say that she was appointed by consensus.
Nancy has been appointed by consensus.
Thank you.
Item number 8, items referred to in presentation of the town attorney. Robert?
I have no report this evening.
Thank you, sir. Item number 9, items referred to in presentations from the town manager. Drew?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll start with department reports, and we're going to do them in the order in which they appear in your packet that was sent to you via email. So Chief Black first, please.
I got a little more coffee. Sorry.
Okay, good evening. A little mask issue there. Good evening, everyone who's in the room and also out in the Zoom world. Tonight I'll present the March activities for the Duck Fire Department. And I'll start with just a few things. Total incidents, 24. We'll get into that in a minute. 5 fire inspections in April. We had 595 training hours, which is something we'll talk about here shortly, and then completed the budget request for the town manager after multiple renditions. So to date, we've had 57 calls. Again, I'm going to always compare to the year before last year as we go through the spring. We were down a little bit compared to last year, but not as much as you think, but you'll see it show up when we just talk about March. But through March, we've had 57 calls, not too much different from 2019 or 2018, a bit of a difference from 2020. When you look at just March, you can see where we were last year with everything shut down, that we definitely dropped, though we are up above what we normally are. So that'll be interesting to watch over the next couple months. As you can see, town's busier. We tend to see more calls, and the breakdown of those calls are as follows. And what we'll see with increased population is usually the increase in those Rescue 11 calls. And then I'll do it in a pie chart form here. You can see a little bit of everything. The other thing we tend to see this time of year is the green, which is alarm activations, a lot of breakfast cooking. And we tend to see some more alarm activations. So this month I thought or tonight especially, I thought from last month I'd be coming to you with all kinds of great pictures from our live burn training down in Buxton. And we were the one weekend of the month that had the high winds and some overwash. So it was the 50-mile-an-hour wind weekend. So we had to cancel our live burn training. But another opportunity arose, and we actually get this opportunity quite often, probably once a year, maybe once every 14, 16 months, and that's the ability to train in an acquired structure. And this is where Sandy's really great. So she'll get a permit for a demolition, and someone buys a house, they want to redo a house, and they'll want to take it down. In the past, we've burned them down. If all the stars align correctly, that's something we can do. We wouldn't probably do it this close to the season, but if there's an opportunity for us to go in and just train in it, it's great. It is the most realistic training we can get without actually having an event. In some ways, it's better than even going to the burn facility because that's a known structure, it's brick, it's great for heat and fire and smoky conditions, but we really don't get to practice those skills that we actually do when we go to any typical house, you know, in Duck or on the Outer Banks. So we had that opportunity, and that's what I'm going to focus on here tonight with a few pictures. It is the most realistic training we can have. So these are a few pictures from the training we did. I'll start with this one. After a fire, if you have a kitchen fire, put the fire out, well, we've got to pull ceilings and do other things to make sure there's no fire behind the wall or things like that. So this is something we can make this at the fire department. We can get sheetrock and we can make it and have people pull ceilings, but to be able to go into a structure and actually trash it, if you will, and do it for real in a home is huge. So we did this last Saturday. We did a long training. The other piece is we can climb ladders at the fire department all day or on the burn building, but to be able to actually climb a ladder at a house and actually do what we need to do to break a window, make entry, again, this realistic training is invaluable. So a few other pictures I'll show you. Hose deployment. We practice all the time. You see us flowing lines and water all over the parking lots as much as we can, but when you can actually go to a house and pull up and spray water, whether on it or in it, I don't have interior pictures, that's a little hard to capture, you can see where you can't reproduce this. And then probably the biggest one for us is to be able to do and practice ventilation. So we have a prop at the fire department, it's in the back. When we go to the burn building, we have a prop on top of the Buxton burn building that we can use, but to be able to actually go to a home and practice getting on the roof, whether with the ladder or with ladders or with the ladder truck, it's huge. So you can see we did it not too long ago in the backyard, but we were able to actually go do it on the roof in the house that we had this past week. The other amazing piece when we can get something in town is the ability to do mutual aid training. So last night, we only had a short window with this house, but last night we were able to get together with Southern Shores and break up into groups. We had them respond in. We actually had We used some smoke bombs, so we did call Dare Central and let them know that we would be doing this, and simulated basically a structure fire and with our mutual aid partner, Southern Shores. So here, one of the groups is practicing, again, ventilation, and we did some vent enter search for rescue. And then what was the other picture? Here, we were actually just working on skills. A couple folks were getting ready to take that ladder, again, to go climb on the outside of the building to do vent enter search. And I throw in a picture here at the end of all of us debriefing after it, and then going back. And we actually did a scenario, broke it down, and then went back and did skill work. So great opportunity. We appreciate the homeowners. We'll follow up with them with pictures and T-shirts and a big thank you. So I think we have another one in the fall, but shout out to Sandy for recognizing those opportunities for us. And then for April, we do, I think most of you have heard, unfortunately, we hired a great firefighter with Spencer Thomas, and he's a young visionary, and he's going to make his trip today across country to California to find the next stage of his young life. So unfortunately, he wasn't with us very long. It's the times, you know, they're adventurous and want to take advantage. So we are re-advertising right now, hope to fill that position by mid-May. It's a bit of a sting for us, but he was great. He just wanted to try other things. So we're in process right now to re-advertise. We'll be doing a lot of extrication training. You'll probably see some vehicles out there now. On the 17th, we actually have some folks coming in with some different types of tools and a training to use along with our tools, so we're taking advantage of that. We normally do this in the spring. Working on, again, great opportunity with changes with the policies in town is to align our policies and risk management, so we'll be working on that. That'll be a several-month project, but we're really kicking that off now that we're past at least submitting the budget. And then we'll finish up a lot of our fire prevention activities, the hydrant maintenance and the fire inspections before going into the season. So I'll leave with that. This is a picture of some of our folks training on Saturday, and I just want to take the opportunity to thank you. It's been a privilege to serve the last 15 years. When Drew sat with all of us, one of his questions is, why do you want to work in the town of Duck? And what's so unique here is that we've been building since day one, watching the incorporation committee start to look at building a town. You know, if you go be a firefighter or a fire chief in most areas, you know, the town's been there forever, but this was something new, and we're building. As the town's building, we're having to change, and it's been a huge challenge for me, but one I take seriously as a community member, but also to watch our staff grow in skills and opportunities, whether they're volunteer or the paid staff, has been really neat. So thank you for the last 15 years. I appreciate it. And I'll take any questions.
I want to thank you too, Donna. I can't believe it's been 15 years as a town firefighter and a leader. Thank you so much. And I imagine that wherever this was it in Bayberry Bluffs? I was just kind of figuring it because it's high elevation that the guests that are in these must have gotten some great entertainment from all your equipment and everything too.
Yeah, we had some of our support folks out there doing some education for us and some traffic control, and yeah. A lot of pictures taken.
Quite the show you put on for everybody. Yeah. That's great.
Chief, thank you for everything you've done for the town for the last 15 years. And
thank you.
We all appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Great blue sky, too. Did you take those pictures? I thought so. They were very nice.
If I find it, I'll get it back to you. How are you all this evening?
Good.
Tonight, my theme's going to be technology, so that's mostly what I'm going to talk about. I kind of envy you, Nancy. I'm a nerd, I guess, when it comes to broadband and things like that, so I think that's a great opportunity. Want to talk about an expansion of something we put in place a few years ago and how we've continued to find new ways to use this equipment. So 4 years ago or so, we ended up putting in Cradle Point broadband routers, LTE routers, in our vehicles using FirstNet as our service provider for those routers. And at the onset, they were just used as a switching mechanism, if you will, for our Axon cameras. They really didn't have a robust purpose. That was just what Axon chose to use as the hub for their equipment. We found that we could basically transform our patrol vehicles into rolling office spaces, and we've continued towards that mission ever since. So taking it a step further now, we're going to go ahead and add vehicle telematics to our fleet. So we're going to use those existing Cradle Point routers. They'll hook into the car's computer system. They'll then transmit that information through FirstNet to a server, and then come back down to us through a web-based platform through a company called Forward Thinking Solutions. So what it really does is take us into the future. So it's going to give us a few things. First of all, we don't have a location tracking system on any of our equipment, our radio equipment, like a lot of places do. So this will allow us to know where our officers are at all times when they're working. So that's not to track their movements, but if one of them doesn't answer the radio in the middle of the night, or we can't find them, we'll be instantly able to look at a app-based application or phone-based application and see exactly where they are and get help to them. So the other side of that is really the analytics side for us. We'll be able to generate 34 vehicle-generated data points in real time. So we'll know what the mileage is on those vehicles. We'll know when there's maintenance codes that have triggered before the driver knows. We'll know about fuel level, fuel consumption, you name it, it's on there. So the analytics that are going to be available to us will be huge in maintaining our fleet, knowing what's working, what's not, and improving fuel efficiency. So really excited to get this project rolling. Because we had the bulk of the equipment in place, is a relatively low cost to take advantage of what we already started. So it kind of rolls me into the 3-year technology plan that we hope to put into place. And a lot of things, the stars have just aligned over the last month or so since our retreat, when I told you about a number of systems we had in place that were antiquated and needed to be replaced. Well, out of the blue, we get contacted by the sheriff's office, and they have a dispatch program essentially over there that runs the 911 center that's very old and antiquated. And the sheriff thought this is a great opportunity to form a countywide partnership and solve this problem for everybody. So I'll get into what that gives us in just a second. But so our plan is to move everything out of our fixed infrastructure and into our vehicles. It'll allow us to not have to have expensive servers in the office anymore. We'll be able to combine a lot of the programs, individual software programs we use, into this new software. So we really want to move everything out into the field. We're going to leverage that current broadband technology that I talked about to make the connectivity to make it all work. It's going to reduce the need, as I said, for costly infrastructure. It's going to significantly increase officer efficiency and productivity. And best of all, it's going to keep them out in the community where they need to be, where they want to be seen. They won't have to come into the office to do reports. They'll have real-time access to everything that these systems provide at their fingertips through their mobile data terminals and even through their smartphones. So really exciting path that we're taking here. And as I talk to more and more people around the county and then state, I realize how far ahead we are technology-wise of a lot of other people. And it's really neat to see agencies adopt things that we put in place 4 or 5 years ago as we go forward, knowing that what we did worked. And in a lot of cases, we took a leap of faith when we went down the road with a couple of these things, and they really have paid off for us. So just to talk a little bit about this countywide public safety suite. So the real beauty of this is that the county's going to be able to leverage, hopefully, 911 funds to pay for the bulk of the project. So the sheriff's office would basically be responsible for all the infrastructure related to it. So us as end users would only pay our portion of what we use. So it's not a straight split amongst the 5 municipal law enforcement agencies. We pay for what we have in terms of resources. So it's initially a per officer price is how they figure it out. And then we can choose from 60 different modules within the software. If there's something that works for Duck and we want to see it, then we can add that on. A good example of that is they have a web-based community engagement platform. And it does everything from allowing the self-reporting of very basic crimes such as a bicycle theft or loss, up to being able to access real-time analytics about our crime data, what's going on, our call volume. Many of the things you see in our weekly, monthly reports that you get will be available up-to-date, real-time every day. So really looking forward to that. That's something we added. And we also opted to add into our quote a more robust analytics software so that we can really drill down and look at things. Interestingly enough, it's a great program. Trying to think of the words, there's something in my mind, but ComStat, rather, something, Rob, I'm sure you're familiar with, something that Chief Cudo was big on, but we'll be able to leverage that same analytic data that we began to put together ourselves in spreadsheets directly through this platform. So it saves a lot of labor to get the same result. So we'll really be able to look at where we have problems. So it really is an end-to-end solution. So what starts in the 911 center with a call and the notes that a dispatcher may put in will flow right to the officer. They can extract that information right into their incident report. That goes into an investigative module. We can then track this whole case all the way through, and the officer doesn't have to retype the information in each and every time as they do now. It'll also import all of our data from eCitation, including warning tickets, which is the bulk of what we issue. Prior to now, somebody had to physically re-enter everything into the database. So a lot of time was spent on the administrative side of that. So really looking forward to where this goes. The county hopefully will be making a presentation to the commissioners over the next couple of months. Once that initial contract is signed, we'll reach out to the municipal agencies and we'll each look at what our piece of the puzzle is going to be. And then the hope is from the go date, it would be about 18 months before that was built and put in place and went live. So something that I never imagined in a million years we could get accomplished in Dare County is happening. And when we looked at a standalone system, it was well over $100,000, probably more in the neighborhood of $150,000. Our upfront cost for this system will be less than $70,000, what we hope. And then that is, from there on, it's an annual maintenance fee that actually equates to less than we're paying now for the whole host of programs that we have to keep in place. So long run, we'll see a significant cost savings by doing this. And then also not having to buy those expensive servers and things. So excited to see where this goes, and I hope to be able to bring you back some pretty neat information on this as we move forward. Some March highlights. We got the police budget submitted. I understand Drew's going to take everything from the police budget. It sounds like we're paying for everything now. He jokes me every time somebody asks somebody, he says, I can find the money for it. We had another very successful medication take-back event, week-long event. We haven't got the weight yet because it's the incineration date has been moved to May, so I'll get that back to you in the next couple months. We had an opportunity to meet with the new BLET director with COA under the leadership of the new dean. There's definitely some changes happening in that program, some much-needed changes, so looking forward to seeing where that goes. We've set up, under the league's guidance, a driver training program that'll be going forward, an annual program that all officers will have to go through. Every year, it'll be part classroom training that'll look at trends, accident trends. This isn't a pursuit driving. This is day-to-day driving. What are we having issues with? And then we're going to add ourselves a actual physical course to it. So hopefully I've brought in somebody from outside to help us set this up with the plan of turning it all over to our sergeants to handle going forward in the years to come. We have a lot of new officers, so we've put together a 2-day rifle training program for this fall that'll allow the entire department to go through. Everybody will establish a baseline and be trained equally on that. So looking forward to getting that done. And then we're certainly in full motion for planning for the summer season. As I came in this morning, it looked like June or July out there. So there's no doubt, based on everything we're hearing, we're going to have a record summer. So looking forward to it, but also expect some challenges to come from it. Before I get into this much numbers, just a very, as I'm a nerd for technology, I'm also a nerd for the legislature. So I love following what they're doing. As Joe Hurd mentioned the other day, he felt like it was the year of planning and zoning was kind of the target of the legislature. Well, in the last few days, it really shifted back to law enforcement too, so we're tied on that. We're seeing a ton of proposals come out, a lot of which deal with police reform, something that I've talked about before, a lot of which I support fully. What really makes me feel good about where we are as a town is in every case, the proposals that I've read at the department level, we put in place, not just yesterday, but years ago. So we were the first in the county to put a robust body camera program in place. We've had in-car cameras for well over 15 years. We changed policy to conform with use of force. We put early intervention plan in place. So a lot of those things, we've done them already, and I don't think any of the legislation is going to greatly affect us other than in a positive way for some things that need to happen. We'll see where all that goes, but as you know, a lot of bills get introduced, only a small number actually get passed, but looking forward to seeing that go through, and a lot of positive engagements from both sides of the legislature on this issue. So I think it's going to be a good outcome for all of us. Finally saw numbers shift back up. So I think we're back post-COVID and back on the right track again. Saw a slight increase month to month, and then also, interestingly enough, very, very close year to date over the two. Just to look at some of March traffic enforcement actions, the oddest thing to me is the only one traffic crash occurred. That with all the traffic out there, I think that's a really good sign, and I hope that's a sign of things to come for the rest of the season. We ended our residential property check program in March as all the homeowners were coming back. People were getting set up for the season, so it was time to let that go. So we've shifted our focus back on the roads and back towards the businesses. Only had a few folks request extra patrols, and then we only had one arrest in March. So speed sign data and LPR data is all going to be available online if it's not already, thanks to Christian. And the one thing I want to point out, last meeting I had talked about drilling down on some of the data and really figuring out what was going on with it. We've done that. We've taken sample data sets and we've begun to look at it. And next month, I won't keep too long today. Next month, I'll explain a little bit more about how LPR technology works. It's the cameras pick up alphanumeric characters, just to keep it simple. So if the side of a Kellogg's truck goes by, that's full of alphanumeric characters. It may read that truck 5, 6, 7, 8 times as it passes because it's only looking for those alphanumeric characters. So it can greatly skew numbers if you look at traffic counts based on that. So what we're trying to do is come up with a reasonable number that we can basically estimate plus or minus where the data is best and most accurate. So working on that, hope to bring that back to you next month. So, and then I'm just going to leave it with some of you may have known or seen in the paper, but we lost Lieutenant Bill Walker, not our Bill Walker, but I've known Bill for nearly 30 years. He was just one of the greatest guys, not just as a law enforcement officer, but in our community. He was so engaged in everything. But so I just wanted to memorialize him this evening and ask that we keep his lovely wife Stephanie and his 3 boys in our thoughts as we lay him to rest tomorrow. So, any questions?
I did, Jeff. The information that you brought to us about the plan from the sheriff department with the new system, that's really exciting. So I just want to say that's great. And then are all the municipalities going to be able to opt into it? Is that what, or are they sort of, is it just sort of makes sense that everyone's just going to do it? Because it is, it's a significant investment on our part if it's, 70,000 or which I'm not, but I'm just curious, are all the towns aspiring to join in, or do you even know yet?
I don't have official answers yet, but I can tell you tentatively, all municipalities have expressed a desire to be on board with it. There are portions of the system that even if a municipality opts out, they will still get that as part of as we do now. They'll still get computer-aided dispatch because that's countywide. But everybody that was in the meeting, all the chiefs and stakeholders, realize the power of having the shared data this way. It's something we've all looked for years and years, and every agency is paying for their own standalone software at sometimes a much greater cost than what this would be. So my prediction is yes, we're going to have 100% participation, but obviously that's a final question. We'll have to go to councils, including you all, to approve that contract. But I hope that that can happen. Motorola has expressed a willingness. It's a different division than our radios, but they've expressed a willingness and a flexibility to make this work as far as deferring payments, doing whatever needs to be done to get it in place for everybody based on their budget years. So.
Okay, thank you for that. That's
Chief,
exciting.
you mentioned also in the technology part about being able to track an officer in the field. Can you track the officer and the car separately, or?
Right now, just the vehicle itself. There is technology in the new radios that we're looking at that would allow that. There's some discussion about how that would be utilized with the sheriff, so I don't have a definitive answer, but if it's up to me, and I think if it's up to any of my officers, we want people to know where we are at all times. So they're certainly not trying to hide anything, so I think that's an officer safety advantage. So I hope that if that's a choice for individual agencies to opt into, that would certainly be something I would be opting into. All right.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. You got 5 different things here, Joe. I don't know which one you want. Sorry.
Right, we'll start off with some of the permit activity. And what you see up there is another really, really strong month, up 18% from last year. That has brought us, after a relatively slow start at the beginning of this fiscal year, up to 10% higher than last year. And if you'll recall, last year was a really big year for us, and we're up 10% on that right now. And then as we go down further and look, curiously enough, the one part where things had been trending below was in the trade permits, your electrical, plumbing, mechanical, HVAC type things. But over this past month, up 43% from this time last year, which actually puts us up close to the overall permit now, up 7% for the year now, whereas that had been trending below for a long time. So again, seeing an awful lot of activity. And we'll just highlight a few things here. We do have a few areas where we're seeing some focal points for that activity. Although with that much, it's kind of everywhere, but we do have some up in the Sanderlane subdivision. You could see there toward the top of that map. And then in Carolina Dunes, kind of around the middle of that map. And then, don't know what's in the water along Christopher Drive, but there's a lot of folks who decided to go ahead and improve their properties in a variety of ways along that stretch. A really large cluster there of permit activity going on there. And then you can also see some spots there along the left side of this map. That is the village, Duck Village. You can see there's a good bit of activity going on in some of our businesses and commercial as well. I'm just going to highlight a couple of permits. There's and again, an awful lot of activity, but really only 2 of a large enough scale to highlight. One of which is we do have a new residence. We've issued a permit for at 121 Dunes Crest. And then at 1158 Duck Road, you can see we have a $720,000 renovation permit. For those who've driven by that, that's the house you'll see off to your right, sort of blue-gray kind of house. They're doing a very substantial addition on that. and doing an awful lot of work to the property. Really going to be a show place when it's done there. But those are two real significant projects we've got going on right now. And we'll shift over into just some of the general departmental things. Just to highlight a few of the projects for the council so you'll know what's going on as things are coming up. Before we meet again, our long-awaited project over there near the Town Park entrance drive, our rain garden wetland project, Emerald Forest, who received that contract, scheduled to begin on April the 23rd. So they should proceed very quickly. It's not going to be a particularly lengthy project. It's relatively small scale as they go. And again, with that project, we were able to at least subsidize some of that cost with a grant obtained from Dare County Soil and Water Conservation District. We are continuing to move forward. I won't repeat all of the dates on this because they haven't changed, but our beach renourishment project is moving forward. The permits are in, still looking at construction in the summer of 2022. We have had a couple things I wanted to highlight for you is that we have had some positive movement regarding obtaining some construction access easements. So we hope to be able to update you further as those negotiations proceed. And that we do have a beach nourishment working group meeting in here a week from today, where we're again meeting with all of the different communities, Dare County, all the oceanfront municipalities, as well as our engineers and contractors who are working with the different projects. Again, the intent of that is for everybody to kind of know what's going on, come up with ideas, look for ways that we can work together to make these projects better, more efficient, less expensive for each of the communities involved. Something you're going to see before you at your meeting next month. Again, we'll call it our long-awaited General Statute Chapter 160D amendments. This is really related to the planning enabling legislation for the state. We've talked about this before, but we did have an opportunity to receive some assistance with a lot of the legwork, literally going through page by page through our ordinances. And we're able to work that out through the League of Municipalities with Stewart, the same planning engineering company that worked with us on the comprehensive and land use plan. So they've provided us with that background information and really saved us an awful lot of hours and legwork in the process. That'll be going to the planning board next week. And then we'll come back to the council where we will have, as we do for text amendments, an initial look at that in May and public hearing, final decision in June. Has to be adopted by July to bring us into compliance with the new state legislation. Again, the focus on that is really, a lot of it is really wording changes, but there are some changes to the different processes that we use for development applications and things like that. So there'll be a few things like that that we have to alter to be consistent with the new state law. Speaking of our comprehensive and land use plan, this has been bafflingly long, but it's been 7 months now with the Division of Coastal Management waiting months to get comments, addressing those, waiting many more months to get a second set. We did recently get that second set of comments, working with Stewart on those final amendments. Then it will be forwarded to the Secretary of the Coastal Resources Commission. Once it is approved there, it will return to town council for a final adoption or, readoption. You adopt the proposal, but there are things in it that have been tweaked in that they're not changing things and telling us you need to recommend this or that, but a lot of it has to do with how the document is organized and things. We'll provide you with a summary of the types of changes that were made, but the council would have to readopt that when it comes back to us, hopefully within a few months here. And I believe this is the final slide. Did want to let the council know, had a good opportunity to talk with the staff at the Division of Coastal Management, Office of Recovery and Resiliency at the state level regarding the grant that we received through the Resilient Coastal Communities Program. This is that phased grant I've talked about several times, about $170,000 over 3 years. So we're talking with them now. We have been assigned to work with VHB. They actually assign us a planning engineering firm. We did get to at least tell them these are some firms we've worked with and had success with in the past, and so they chose that. VHB will also be working with Nags Head, so both of the Outer Banks communities in the program will be working with VHB. At this point, we're working with them to define a scope of work for that first year. If you'll remember, this is a phased grant over 3 years. And since we have done the most substantial parts of what other communities are needing to do with their vulnerability assessment, if you'll recall, we got the grant and worked with Western Carolina University on that. We've done that. So we're just trying to identify what are the gaps, what are the other things that they want us to do to be at a good point when we get that second phase next year. And then we're able to begin to do, again, what we're seeking to do is a stormwater management study, townwide, looking at problematic areas in certain neighborhoods that have had repetitive flooding in the past. So that's progressing nicely, but that's the stage we're in, is just working with VHB on identifying that scope of work and what we need to do to fill those gaps. And that's all I had for you this evening. I'd be glad to answer any questions the council might have.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah. That's a good planning. We've gotten some good reports tonight.
Yeah, really good.
A lot of good information.
A lot of information.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel like I need to be one of those crowd people that's like. And I would like to know how I can sign up for the driving class with Chief Ackerman. Perfect. Okay, so, oops. I wanted to first address the thing that I know is on lots of people's mind is our change to the residential waste collection schedule. So my role in this is obviously communicating with the public about these changes. So I did just want to wrap up the survey for council. Just I know that you've seen some of this data, but I threw up a graph here of, I think, the most pertinent information. We sent out a very short survey. We had 367 responses, and overwhelmingly, the people who answered were willing to try the schedule. You can see here almost 70% just said yes, they were willing to try it for the summer. Much smaller percentage said they'd like to see the schedule before they decided. And we had very few people just flat out say no. We did have an open comment section on there, and so we did get a variety of comments from the public. Many of them were about how the messaging would be communicated, which I'll go over in a moment. and just some other questions, particularly from rollback services. So Sandy Cross and I have been working directly with the rollback services that contacted us, and just today, I've had most of them agree to help us roll out all the new stickers for the trash cans and all of those sorts of things. So we're keeping a very open line of communication with them throughout the summer. So hopefully that'll, one, help us quickly identify any issues with this change in schedule with waste management, and also help us troubleshoot, if there's a way that we can make this work better. So I just wanted to show you guys that data. If anyone is interested in all of the data, anyone from the public, I'm happy to share it. But there were only 3 questions, so this is pretty much the heart of it. So just going over really quickly so we're all on the same page about how this information is going out. We've done a direct mailing with postcards, and you can see the actual postcard here that has information for everyone. So we directly mailed those postcards to everyone with an address in Duck. So those are in people's mailboxes already. We do have our brochure on hand now, and the brochure also contains the new trash schedule, and those brochures will be distributed townwide, hopefully by the end of next week. We have redone our fridge clings, and that has all of the new information on it, and we're working with the rental and property management companies to get those delivered to them with their brochures, and I'll be directly contacting all of the HOA presidents to see how they would like us to work within their particular subdivisions. Obviously, all of these items can be picked up at Town Hall as well. Waste Management offered to print the stickers for us for the trash cans, and they are footing the bill for that. So we had a little less control about delivery time on the new can stickers, but they are color-coded. They should be arriving at the end of next week. And like I said, I've heard back from most of the rollback services that will be assisting us placing them. We have volunteers and staff members who will also be helping us apply those stickers. So right now, the plan is that in the next 3 trash collections, that someone will be out each one of those collections, making sure every can has a sticker. And again, we'll be supplying HOAs, property management companies, whoever wants them, with a small stash in case people get new trash cans, and we will also have them in the office. We also are gonna have a mechanism in the office this summer to continue to collect comments from people. I've tried to make it very clear that we would like to hear from our citizens about how this is working. Obviously, the goal here is to improve the schedule of trash pickup and not have as many missed collections. So we really do want to hear from people, and I'm going to keep reiterating that in my communications. So that we can hear from people and make sure that we're meeting the goal that we want to, and we can give appropriate feedback to Waste Management. So please feel free anytime to let me know if you're seeing a line of communication I'm missing. It's been in the e-news, social media, website, all of those things. So.
Question, can I just ask one question on this?
Yes.
Will we be monitoring the number of trucks that they send in? Say today they send in 4 trucks to do on Monday pickup. Will we know if they send 4 trucks in, or are we going to know they're going to cut that in half to 2? Are we going to monitor that?
Mr. Town Manager, that might be a question that I have to get back to.
I mean, I think we should monitor the number of
We'll have
trucks.
to talk to the contractor about that and see if they can provide that data to us.
I'll make a note to talk to Sandy about that. Uh-oh. Speaking of surveys, now that we've wrapped up one survey, I'm looking into sending out another survey. I've been asked to poll our stakeholders regarding our current leash ordinance on the beach, not the rest of town, but specifically on the beach. Currently, we allow dogs on the beach year-round, unleashed under the control of their owner. And we have heard some comments in the past about looking at reevaluating this ordinance, and we've had a few more comments. I feel like over the past year, we've had so many visitors in Duck really consistently in the Outer Banks over the past year. So I've been asked by the mayor and the town manager to do another survey. We had really great success with the trash survey. So currently, I have a 4-question survey that's very easy to fill out. I plan to have it out from April 9th to 21st and have the results ready to report to council by the 26th, so that if you do want to review this and make any suggested changes or things to try for the summer, we'll have a little bit of time there. This survey will also give people the ability to add free-form comments. And I'll distribute it in a similar manner to the trash survey, except that I'll have an additional push to make sure that we're hearing from our visitor stakeholders. You know, the trash survey was obviously available to visitors, but I don't know how much they are interested in that, but they may be much more interested in this. So the timeline of the survey will be a little bit longer, so that we can hopefully capture some of that. So let me know if you have any questions on that. And just to update everyone, the 2021 brochure is here. It's in our hands. It is being distributed to all of our businesses. It'll probably come next week to all of the rental companies, because we do want to bundle it with the clings and the trash can stickers to make sure they're receiving kind of a package for that. It's already available in the town hall. Betsy is hard at work right now formatting our summer newsletter. You know, last year we did a late spring newsletter, and then we did not do one in the fall due to COVID. So this one, again, is a little bit later than usual, but so that we could take advantage of that time to look at what we might be doing for summer events and some of the other things this summer. And so for advertising and marketing, right now, anything in print or digital that's gone out has just been a general come to visit Duck information, including the Duck Merchants Association. We will have time, some of the summer publications that will be out, we will have time to make some decisions about our late summer, fall events before those go out. And speaking of events, I told you I would come back this month with some proposals and see if there's a consensus this evening. So these are all open for discussion, of course, but I propose the following items after a lot of discussion with Betsy. So our proposal is that in June and July that we begin virtual fitness along the same timeline that we would normally have events, so about mid-June. It's very adaptable. If things open up very soon, both of those fitness activities could move to live. And we also have sponsors who are on board for a virtual, hybrid, or live program. So that's yoga and dynamic flow. We also are looking at the 4th of July storefront decorating contest. And we propose that we will reach out to businesses and look at some sort of time frame. I have June 21st to July 11th on here. That's about 3 weeks. That we can move that around a little if people would like to see that at a different time. I tried to capture, changeover days and things like that. The town would create a map. We would have businesses sign up if they were interested, and then we would come up with categories and prizes and a voting platform that the public could submit votes for these businesses. Obviously, once we get in touch with the businesses, we probably will have some fine tuning to do about what works best for them, but if the council as a whole is okay with us proceeding with the storefront decorating instead of our traditional parade, we would start contacting those businesses soon. Questions, comments on that?
I think stretching it out over 3 or 4 weeks is a great idea.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think the decorations that we've seen up, even at the town property, as always, it's nice for the people that are seeing it all the time. So, I guess the contest part, I would agree, it's nice to have it, concise, but I think we'll probably see that people would, probably enjoy them, this whole,
Right. And
put a lot of effort into it. You might as well keep them up for a while.
And I expect that businesses most likely will keep them up longer, but we're trying to come up with a time to tell them when voting is available.
Right, and they'll stay fresher.
Yeah.
Less wind and midge damage,
Okay, great. And then for the rest of the summer, based on how things are looking both in the Outer Banks and the country, I know that we have gone back and forth and discussed starting events in August versus September. And so our proposal tentatively right now is to, if we start the hybrid fitness in June, that is one thing that if conditions warranted in August would be very easy for us to switch to doing live. So we'd already have those time slots advertised, and it's something we could switch to live or hybrid if we found that people weren't as interested in coming live. We have a lot of options. So the fitness is really adaptable. And so it wouldn't cost us any extra, it wouldn't change our advertising to take that hybrid or live if conditions are okay. Another consideration is, you know, if we think that we want to advertise things in August, and we can wait to advertise hard dates until just before, but look at some things that would provide adequate space in August and could also be, you know, planned very quickly or pivoted or postponed till September. So for us, we think that would be mostly using the town green and staying away from amphitheater events, making sure people have really a lot of access to spread out. And so things like movies or concerts by local bands would help us kind of slowly build up to September when we talked about bringing back some more options. So these would be things, you know, we might look at instead of doing a movie one night and a concert one night and all of these things that, you know, one week we might do a movie, see how that goes. If that's okay, do a concert the next week. So that's just what I wanted to bring to council tonight. If you are comfortable with us beginning to look at that, like I said, we won't back ourselves into a corner or advertise ourselves into a corner about August, but just really have a little bit of freedom to look at adapting some things if conditions warrant and if the public seems amenable. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Christian, I think that makes really good sense to kind of ease into it as you're suggesting and test it out. How do you envision advertising if you decided, say, to do a movie? Would you do it on the marquee here at the town hall, and you know, on a Monday, and say movie on Thursday, for example, and would you put it on Facebook, and what else would you do?
All of the above, yes. One of the things that I know I mentioned during the retreat, talking about budgeting moving forward in the next fiscal year, is taking advantage of new or additional digital offerings that a lot of our traditional advertising has. So while we still have contracts for some print advertising and some of our really popular, you know, free tourist magazines, a lot of those places now are offering digital options. So for instance, I may have slightly reduced the size of our print ad, but it has gained me some digital space, which is obviously very versatile. So I can contact 3 or 4 different companies, and they can change the ad that's on their website immediately to show new events that we would have. Okay. So I would take advantage of as many digital options as we have. And bless you. A lot of those companies also, as part of the package, use their social media to share some of our message so we can get it amplified. And radio too, we usually have a small agreement with the radio stations.
Yeah, I don't think there's any objection from anybody on council for that plan. Have you heard anything from the other PIOs from the other towns with respect to their timelines?
So right now, so I'm going to take farmers markets out of it because it's a little bit different and extra. Right now, it sounds like most of the other towns, really, it's just Nags Head and Manio that do kind of weekly summer events like we do. They're looking at late July. As far as I know, we haven't had an updated meeting, but that was our last meeting. So we'd be pretty much on track if we were trying to look at starting in August. But you know, I am perfectly comfortable taking a conservative approach and, you know, realizing that our social media and our website and our marquee really do a great job of reaching our visitors. So I think that we could have some almost impromptu events very easily and have a good turnout.
I agree.
Christian, with the movies and the concerts or anything that's going to be on the green, if the outdoor gathering limit is 100, are you going to have to figure out a way to use a counter or a gate or like?
Right. We'll just gonna paint circles and it'll be like musical chairs. No, if we still have a restrictive outdoor gathering limit, this is most likely off the table because that is very difficult for us to control in the park. So this is us hoping that things are much more open. So either that the outdoor gathering limit is gone away or the cap is much, much higher. So those are all things we'll be taking into account, yes.
A new use for those hula hoops, right? It's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I like it. Okay, well, thank you. And we'll, of course, continue to keep you updated as things change monthly. But we did want to throw out there that we would like to take some baby steps forward. And, and that's all for me. Ta-da! If anyone has any questions or comments, please let me know. Great.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Okay.
At this time, you're still thinking like we have a jazz festival, correct?
Yes, so we are moving forward planning with the Jazz Festival, and so I've been starting to, I'm starting to get the artist contracts back in. Some of them we're just adding an addendum. Some of them we're just doing a new contract for the same date, but right now my plan is, I'm a little bit behind on getting the Jazz Festival Facebook up and going for August Jazz Appreciation Month, but that'll be going in the next few days, and I'm going to lead up to an announcement on the last day of April that will have our new logo and the lineup. So, yeah, so right now we're moving ahead with that. All of the artists are very excited and are fine with our new contract that obviously has a COVID clause.
What will the date be, Christian, where you have to say?
It is October 9th and 10th.
I'm sorry, the with respect to the outdoor gathering, like when will the go, no-go date be for like being able to say we're a go, we're a no-go if we still don't have more than 100?
Right, so right now it's very helpful when the governor puts that end date on each of his executive orders, because that gives us, if the executive order isn't changing for a month, then we've cleared our calendar for a month.
Right.
If we're right at the cusp of one of those, I think that we'll have to look at, what have we booked, what can we pivot? Certainly, I would want to make sure that we have plenty of time, a couple of weeks, to be able to react to an opening, because I think that our visitors will need that time to react as well. But I'm certainly open to suggestions, and we'll be continuing our PIO meetings every 2 weeks as often as we can, probably for the rest of eternity, which has been really great. So we usually have discussion and a health department representative in those meetings. So when it is time for one of the executive orders, close to being done, we usually have quite a bit of conversation. So,
thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take things a little out of order, if the council will permit me to do that. The financial policies was listed first, and then the financial report. I'll just do the monthly financial report first, if that's okay with you all. You have the data from Teresa that we sent that to you yesterday, her monthly report. I provided as your places here the pictures that I'm about to show. all of which say that we are in very good shape financially. You can see this, the first slide does show our monthly cash balance, how we're comparing to fiscal 20. We are obviously ahead here to the tune of about $800,000 more cash on hand this year at this time than last. I want to show you, like we did last month, the mix of how we keep your funds, the public's funds. The general account right now is about as low as we wanted it to be at the end of March. Matter of fact, there was a transfer made here at the beginning of the month of April to put more cash in that account. That was actually less than 1% of our holdings. We'd like to run that at right around 10% in cash that we can write checks against. Revenue numbers are running exceptionally well in most categories. Teresa provided you a little bit of narrative, and I will as well. Ad valorem, we're running about $1,500 difference end of March this year versus last. MSD, we're ahead. Sales tax, as you would expect, we are running ahead of where we were last year, similar to, and then with real estate transfer and occupancy taxes, the collections this year have been outstanding. You can see all the different breakdowns here. The one that, as Teresa mentioned, and I'll highlight, the one state collected local revenue that continues to lag is the utility taxes. Large portion of that is in the telecommunications area. Again, as I mentioned last month, people don't have landlines anymore, so we're continuing to see more and more of a decline in that. Be interesting to see how our electric sales tax reacts to the fact that we're having more occupancy throughout the year in some of our homes. Have not seen any anything statistically significant that I can report quite yet on that. In total, the revenues in the current year are outpacing last year by about $400,000. And we've collected about 73% of our revenue, but we budgeted versus 67 last year. So again, really very positive on the revenue side.
Drew, is this budget an annual budget or a 9-month budget?
This is the annual budget versus 9-month actual.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir. And then this chart, the next one, just shows you the comparison, how we're doing on fiscal 20 versus fiscal 21. Expenditures, right now, about 65% of the budget has been spent. Last year, this time, 65% of the budget. So expenditures are holding very well against the budget. We do have a couple other budget amendments. You did one or did two this evening. We're going to have a couple more cleanup budget amendments that we'll need to do between now and the end of the fiscal year, just to be sure that we remain compliant with the budget ordinance. But the bottom line really is, as you look at the financial picture through the end of March, revenues exceed expenditures by just over $925,000 this year. So that's revenue in excess of expenditures compared to $191,000 last year. So again, very strong year. The budget that you adopted was very conservative in terms of revenue and very conservative in terms of expenditures, rightfully so going into a pandemic, and we're just seeing that we're able to outperform that budget both in revenue and expenditure. So the financial picture for the town of Duck, at least at the end of March, is extremely positive. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on the monthly financials.
Yeah, we can probably anticipate that basically, well, March we've already seen, but probably April and May will give us greater opportunities for revenues since we closed the bridges last year for those 2 months.
Yes, I think as you continue to look at month-to-month comparisons,
Year over year.
Fiscal 21 versus fiscal 20. Yes, sir. I would expect you to probably see some. Of course, sales tax, your sales tax distribution or receipt lags 3 months, so that takes a little while to catch up with itself.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to have a very strong spring and going into the summer, as we've all talked about. So, and it's transfer tax, land transfer tax really seemed to be the thing that really took us over a real top in terms of something that we never really want to budget too aggressively for, but we really had no idea it was going to be at these levels. So it's great to see.
Yeah, it is making revenue budgeting for fiscal 22 a little bit of a challenge. We certainly want to have a little bit of optimism, but not overly optimistic, because at some point especially in looking at the land transfer tax, at some point this all has to slow down some. The real estate market. I'm not going to use any terms that would refer back to 2008, but things are, to me anyway, looking a lot like that. And those of you that have dealt in the real estate business and were in the business back in that time, you're seeing a lot of that same ramp up now, and that's concerning, especially if you're buying property. But we're also just need to be mindful of kind of the macro economy as we're budgeting that particular revenue line, which is a fairly significant source of revenue for us.
It was always such a strong one. And we kept saying, this can't, remember? This can't keep happening. This can't stay this strong. And it kept staying that strong. And then when 2008 happened, it was painful.
I bought a house in eastern North Carolina in 2007 and then rode it all the way down from there, unfortunately. So I'm hoping I don't have that same luck here with the one I just purchased in Dare County. Again, we just need to be, we're having conversations with council about how we're budgeting, but I think as I was introduced to you through the interview process, I kind of laid out that I tend to budget very conservatively in terms of revenue and expenditure. So I think that's a pattern that you all have established here, and I certainly see no reason to alter that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just transition then with your permission to this is just be really a two-part conversation. So the plan is to kind of introduce you to the financial policies that I sent you. This was a memorandum that I sent you in the middle of March. Discuss it a little bit tonight, and then when we come back for the mid-month meeting, look to incorporate any changes that you wish to make, and then move to adoption then, with the idea that we would probably target the effective date of the policies as July 1, so as the fiscal year rolls. So I'm not going to read you the introductory memorandum that I sent to you in March. The genesis of all this was not really having in one place all of the policies that the council had adopted, and not having some policies that I believe that should be in place for a government of our size. So things about debt tolerance and the like. So I'm just going to cover a few things. Again, some of these you had already adopted. They were in different resolutions in different places, and certainly thank Lori for helping me find where they all were. The reason that I like to have them in one place is, as we're talking, especially if we get to the point where we want to go to the bond market, not direct placement bonds like we're looking at now, but actually bond sales, the rating agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, will look for policies, comprehensive policies like this, and look for evidence that management and the elected leaders also actually adhere to their policies. While it's okay to deviate a little bit, as long as the council makes that approval, you don't want to make a habit of deviating, because again, the rating agencies take a very dim view of that. So just want to cover a few things. First, this year in the fiscal 21 budget, you did have a contingency line. So that amount was $75,000. What these policies contemplate is actually, by policy, having a contingency in your general fund budget each year. So the minimum amount would be 1% of the budgeted expenditures, less, so the total expenditures, less debt service and less transfer. So the big stuff. We don't want to include that when you're calculating contingency. So if you're 1%, if we had a 1% minimum when you were preparing the fiscal 21 budget that we're in now, your contingency would have been 77,000, almost 78,000 versus 75. So right on. I am a little bit of a data nerd and a numbers person. Right, Jeff? Yeah. So to me, just having it, rather than being very arbitrary, 75,000 is a good number. But if we can just tie it back to something and have it calculated each year, again, it's your budget. So we can come in with the 1% and you can say, yeah, that's great. We want 2%, or we don't want to go quite that high. And yes, we understand we have a policy, but we want to deviate. But again, gives us guidance as staff to create the budget. So contemplates a minimum of 1% and a maximum of the amount that is generated by 1 cent of your tax rate. So right now that's about $184,000. I don't see that I'm going to bring you a budget with $184,000 in contingency, because what that says is that we don't know how to budget. If we need that much wiggle, we don't.
And I don't know, Drew, if you want to have us talk about points as you're going along.
Absolutely.
Okay, because this one was interesting to me, you know, being here all these years and just, we've always just had a contingency of 75. It was just a plug-in number. I really do like the fact that, you know, that this is tied to something. But I do wonder, and backing up just a little bit, these policies that we develop, I would envision are something that people will look back forward to on future councils and say, well, this is what the council in this, you know, in the early 2020s or whatever came up with. I mean, they may amend them themselves, but they'll see some rationale behind it, and it's sort of I love the idea, you know, just having it all in one spot, and the idea of having, you know, some common goals and foundations, if you will. The 184, though, just seems way high, and I don't get why you can't just say 1%, because isn't the whole idea of contingency, obviously, just for those small overruns, things that we've done in the budget amendment? We've come close on the contingency, but not really that often that I can recall that we've ever had to dip into it tremendously. But again, maybe I'm just not understanding, so I'd just love your insights on that.
So to me, the reason for a max is as your budget grows, 1% could outpace 1 cent. So it highly unlikely in any of our lifetimes that our budget is going to be to the point where that 1% of the budgeted expenditures is greater than 1 cent of your tax rate. But that just gives an upper and lower bounds.
Okay.
Certainly, you know, we could say.
So that's based on, okay, 1 cent of the tax rate. I see. So another idea would be, I mean, is that just a ceiling of? Okay. I thank you for explaining that. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but okay.
And to your point, it also then says to future councils, future staff, don't bother coming in with a contingency number in your budget that's any higher. Again, budget better. But it's always good to have it's good to have an upper and a lower limit. So again, what is your tolerance? So if the tolerance of this council is less than 1 cent of the tax rate, if you want to have an upper limit, it could be a percentage, you know, a minimum of 1, max of 4%. And again, that's the reason we're discussing this tonight. And if you want to look at different scenarios, be certainly happy to run those numbers and let you look at those.
Okay.
Just a further comment to that, and I don't know the answer to this, but I would assume that since my tenure here, I think we've every year probably taken that contingency budget and zeroed it out by the end of the year with expenditures, even though it was at 75,000. I mean, that was obviously the place we went to. So, I mean, that would be an interesting thing to know, because I don't remember any year end where all of a sudden that contingency was sitting out there with a balance in it. Yeah,
Well, you're saying the opposite of what I just said. You're saying that you thought we spent the contingency every year?
Oh, I think we did, yeah. I mean, we just spent some of it tonight, as a matter of fact.
Right.
I mean, that's first.
Yeah.
That's first place you go is basically contingency before you go to the general fund. But I mean, I like the range, but I think that the range is there only from the standpoint of when it comes budgeting time, we make that decision. I mean, that's the bottom line. Basically, is do you want 184 in there? Or do you want 75,000 in there? That's the budgeting decision. And
Or anywhere in between.
yeah.
Right.
That would be interesting to know how much of our contingency we've used.
We can certainly, find that out easy enough.
Yeah.
The
I
last
don't
4 or
think it's
5
that
years.
difficult, but
Yeah.
I've always thought, I knew we came close last year, but honestly, the other years, it was always good to have the contingency, but I always felt like
That it went back into the general fund? Is that what your memory is? Is that that more often than not, there was a remaining amount going back into the general fund at the end of the year?
Unless, I mean, yeah, I guess or it was an optional thing if we were going to spend out of contingency. I didn't think it was because we were, but it'll just be, I don't mean to beat this point up, but it just was, but it's a good discussion to have. So thank you for.
Well, if we didn't use a contingency fund, we used general fund.
Right.
Contingency would just roll back to general fund, so.
Yeah, I can certainly look at the data of what was budgeted versus what was spent over the past.
Couple of years
Yeah,
back.
it's easy enough to do. Sure. So the policy, if adopted as they are, to require that the council approve any grant application that's in excess of $50,000. So period. So even if it's 100% grant, anything over $50,000, council would have to approve. And any grant that requires a local financial match. So the council would have to approve before that application is made. Again, that's just a check. It's not on Joe and it's not on me. It's setting the things up for the future to be sure that you are the stewards and you're the fiduciary. So you need to make those decisions. We'll bring you the information if you want to apply for a grant, because every grant has obligations that the town then has, whether it's financial or otherwise. So just want the elected body to be a part of that decision. Good on that one? Mm-hmm. All right.
So that says if we go to a tourism board with their grant request, it'll be approved by council prior to going there.
If it's in excess of
Over
50,000.
50,000, yeah.
And
Like
again,
the sidewalks.
Right.
That's as simple as putting a grant request on the consent agenda. It's not something that you need to spend a lot of time on.
Yeah, I think historically, we've always been told about it, but we, sort of like ahead of time, we're going to be applying for a grant, this, that, or the other. Sometimes, maybe one time, something came up early, but it certainly seems super reasonable to do that.
The next talks about the appropriation of fund balance. It does limit the amount of the general fund balance that can be appropriated to 10% of the prior year's expenditures. It's basically just saying we don't want to plan to budget to spend a whole lot of fund balance year after year. Again, fund balance is your, for the lack of a better word, your savings account. Mm-hmm. Fund balance should not be used for recurring expenditures. So, the rule of thumb is you don't use non-recurring revenue for recurring expenditures. So we wouldn't use fund balance to pay for additional personnel because that's a recurring liability. So it's a one-time thing for capital items. You all understand what fund balance is used for. This is just, again, it's a budgeting guide saying, don't bring us a budget if you're planning to say that we need to draw down or plan to budget more than 10% of the prior year's expenditures. Again, just controlling that type of expenditure.
And I think as we go through an annual process, if we're doing the budget and we've basically violated one of our policies, adopting that budget, we'd also adopt a change to the policy.
Right. And in this particular one, the policies, if you read them, they do allow for a drawdown. So a very intentional, again, approval of the board saying, yes, we know we want to budget this year and it's going to be 25% of the prior year's expenditures, but we're doing it for this, and it's a purpose for which we have been setting aside money in our fund balance. You have currently a fund balance policy, requires, or the policy sets 75% of expenditures to be your fund balance. You know, the LGC, everyone says it's an LGC policy, Local Government Commission policy, that you have to have 8%, which is a month worth of expenditures in fund balance. It's really not a policy. It's a guideline from the LGC. If we were running here in the coastal environment, if we were anywhere close to single digits, the LGC would be saying, what are you doing? We need to have cash on hand to be able to respond to emergencies. That's why very appropriately this council, or a prior council, I guess, probably set a 75% target. As you can see, and Teresa reported to you at the retreat, about 59% is our current fund balance. Teresa, in talking to her, and I agree with this, recommend changing the way we calculate the expenditures by removing the beach nourishment. So those larger one-time type of expenditures for debt service, and that would mean that your fund balance would have been 69% at the end of fiscal 20. So getting closer to the 75%. It's not as fuzzy math as you think it is. I mean, it makes more sense logically to look at it that way, especially when you have a capital reserve set up for debt service for beach nourishment. So,
Right, that's more like that's a designated fund, or, you know, just pulling it out that way.
yes, ma'am.
And we've always aspired to that 75%, but we've never attained it yet. We've always just been creeping up towards it. But that makes good sense to me. And
So anything in the future that had a separate reserve, say for instance, a public safety building, if there was a reserve on that, would be taken out of the calculation, similar to beach nourishment, or not?
Well, so beach nourishment has dedicated funding through the MSDs and through state statute, other revenue sources that go into that. That would not be the case for the public safety building. That would just be straight general
debt,
or the ad valorem tax rate, service debt.
And just while we're still on fund balance, I'm sorry to be so slow with all this, but I just want to make sure I understand the previous one, where we would appropriate from the fund balance into the budget is what you're talking about there, which we generally don't do unless there's something huge like a fire truck maybe or something. I'm trying to remember when we've ever done that. Can you remember an instance when we've ever done that? Because we are trying to build it, you know, so we try not to take from it, because we've always been trying to creep it up to 75%, and seem to always be eluding it for some reason. But anyway, so that's nothing we've ever done. But it's a good thing to say you can't do it only to this extent, 10% of the previous year.
Right, and again, it's that, and a lot of these policies are not at all reflective of the way that you all have exercised your duties as fiduciaries. This is setting the town up for the future, so the next people that are sitting here have a set of policies and they understand, well, no, we can't dip into our savings account to cover 20% of our budget because
Right.
there's policies.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, they can change the policy, but hopefully then they would listen to their
Right, they'll
professional
see.
staff telling them why that policy is in place.
And the reason I'm just using that example, that's something we've never done, is just so I can understand and make sure I'm understanding it correctly. But, so thank you for letting me think that through with you.
And you've also alluded to the fact that it kind of takes away lazy, sloppy budget habits.
Yeah,
Of counting here, oh, well, we puff this up so we can borrow from it and make that a lot because I'm not sure if I've got the number right here, so.
And particularly in terms of contingency, yeah, that's, you always want to have a little bit of, the technical term is fluff. You know, and that's really what the contingency is.
Yeah.
But we don't want departmental budgets to contain artificial contingency. You know, where you plug a number in, may spend it, may not, but it's there. That's, you know, we really want good concrete spending plans if we're asking the taxpayer to give us money. So this one should give you trouble. Not so much for or falls below 50%, but if your fund balance is less than 75% for 2 consecutive years, you need to then intentionally build your fund balance.
It says 50. 50%. You just said 75.
Yes, so if your fund balance is less than 75% for 2 consecutive years, or at any point falls below 50%.
Oh, okay.
So there are 2 triggers for this.
Okay.
Both of which then require appropriation in the budget to fund balance. And as the Mayor Pro Tem just said, we've been inching up towards 75%. Again, this is just something to think about. This is pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
And it really will say that in the coming budget, well, no, actually it would be in the fiscal 23 budget. That's why we want to adopt these on July 1st. So it would be after, so the next go around of the budget in fiscal 23, we'd actually have to be appropriating money into fund balance if we haven't inched our way up all the way there. Especially this year when we're seeing some really good financial numbers coming in. So something to think about. We can change the trigger. You can not have a trigger at all about replenishment. You can remove the 75% or less and just have that hard trigger of 50%, saying we, under no circumstances do we want to go below 50. Again, it comes back to your tolerance, what you want see in your policy. So if you don't have input on that now, fine. We've got some time. Yes, sir.
Just as an example, and my math might be wrong, but say we've got to come up like $500,000 to get to the 75% based upon being at 69. So what you're saying, basically 125 for the next 4 years, right?
Correct. Right.
And where does it exactly say that in this, under reserve replenishment?
Yep. So it's on page, should be on page 6, so section 6C, 6.3C.
Yeah, the policy requires action to replenish reserves if the unassigned fund balance falls below 50% of the total fund balance. Where does it say this part about the 75? Am I missing it?
It's in its presentation on page 6. That presentation over there? The financial.
This one? I'm reading it out of the,
Well, he kind of brought it up to make it
Reading the
easier.
section.
I'm reading it out of the policy. So
Yeah.
I'm just reading the policy, section 6.3C.
What he did, he put it on his presentation, which makes it a little easier to look at.
Right,
But
I don't see it written. So I'm just, I'm
I'll get you the section number. What this slide doesn't refer to is replenishment, but it is contained in the policy.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just following along with the policy, but, okay, sorry about that. I'll just be quiet. I don't listen. I do see it in your presentation. I just didn't read it in here, that's all. But I'm going to just let it continue to listen. Thank you.
Good. Move on. And then in talking about debt issue, so it does state in the policy here that the typical term of debt that we would issue would be 20 years or less. It does give you the option to go to 30 years for some long-lived assets. So, for instance, if you're going to build a building and you want to extend that to 30 years, you can do that. Again, that's something that we'll be talking with you about as we're looking at a project of that scope. Obviously, it's the same as your home mortgage, right? So the longer you carry it, the more money you're paying to the bank. So we just need to work that out with you.
With respect to the last question, it's on page 6 of the 26-page document, page 6, paragraph C.
Thank you.
Yep. Or yes, yeah, paragraph with the C.
And then the one policy we don't have, and again, good idea to have, is talks about your debt affordability and your debt tolerance, how much debt you're willing to take on. This policy does set a threshold of 20% or less of total expenditures for debt service. Right now, we're at about 17% in fiscal 21. And then does say 10% of expenditure for issuances other than for beach nourishment. So right now, we're at about 4.5%. Pretty good thresholds. I will say that we will exceed that. Obviously, the spike you see in fiscal 23, that is that hopefully 1 year special obligation bond issue that we'll do in anticipation of the FEMA revenue from Hurricane Dorian. So we'll be taking on more debt for that short period of time. So we'll be exceeding that policy again just for that 1 year until we can get that paid off or receive the money basically from FEMA. And you recall that's the $2.5 million, Joe, and it's an interest-only special obligation bond.
Where does the, have you got the 1% in here someplace and the 14 million? I mean, it's in your memo and it's in your extraction. Should we limit ourselves to 1% or should we up that a little bit? I mean, total debt at 14 million, we could have 1 year that would be troublesome, or two.
So are you talking about this next one? So the 10% threshold, so, you know, backing the beach stuff out of it. This one gets a little troubling, pretty much right from the outset. If we're at 10%, again, your tolerance. So if you want to go to 12, 15%, the reason that spikes up is this contemplates the capital improvement plan being executed as it's been presented. So that's primarily due to the public safety station coming online, that debt coming online as this debt continues for this property continues to come on.
I was referring to the percentage of assessed value, where, I mean, basically you can have debt of 125 million, which would be ludicrous, but you were recommending 1%, which is 14 million. Does that give us enough leverage? Do we need to take that 1% up to say 1.5? That's called debt limit on your section 9.6.A.
Yeah, in running the numbers, and again, we can assuming a modest growth, I think I assumed a 1% growth in assessed value. We stayed within that policy. But again, you can increase it. This has absolutely nothing to do with me and my debt tolerance.
Oh, no, I know
It's
that.
the tolerance of the board. So if you want to give more room, and again, if we come in and say, well, dang it, our policy is 1%, and this is going to push us to 1.5% or 2%, you can amend the policy. And again, we just need to document why, and obviously we would be documenting why we would amend the policy to do that.
That prompts a question for me, going back to the whole policy itself. If we find ourselves outside the policy, and then does the council, whoever's doing it, simply say, we're outside of our policy, but we're going to do this? Or do, as you just said, we amend the policy? Because that seems a little bit final.
Well, it's only as final as the next board, because I think your attorney will tell you that this board can't take action to bind a future board. So it's as rigid as the next council meeting, really. You could decide we want to change it at the next meeting.
What's best practices, though, to use your example, to be outside of the recommended, we're at 1.25% instead of 1% in a very special instance? Do you just recognize that and give the rationale, or do you do it and then also amend the policy and have to have a public hearing? And I mean, what's...
Yeah, so the policies won't require, I don't believe won't require a public hearing. It's just the policy of the board, won't be done by ordinance.
Okay.
So it'd just be a policy of the board.
Okay.
What I would likely do is come in and show you this slide that's up here now and say, hey, we're at 11 point whatever %, your policy is 10. And then say to you, do you want to hold that policy rigidly and not issue this debt? Or are you okay for 3 years being outside of your guardrails, with the understanding that we're going to get back inside? And it also then sends a signal, we can't issue any more debt during those years because of that policy. I wouldn't continue to move the guardrails in and out.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But the council can certainly say, nope, we have a 10% policy, period.
Well, the policy will get overridden by the budget adoption. Because if you adopt the budget, you're then therefore violating the policy, but you're doing that knowingly.
Right, and it would be in the manager's budget message, it would be very clear that the adopted policies were outside the guardrail.
Right.
Which I think is good, because,
yeah.
I mean, I like the whole idea of it.
Yeah.
I just was trying to flesh it out a little bit, and how it works.
So with respect to the fund balance, it's kind of the same way? I mean, we set that 75% goal when we were young, really young, and every year we've kind of strived, and there's been some years where we haven't hit it. We knew it because of other things that were going on, but we're still the brass ring we were trying to grab, but...
Right, and I think so.
But we never had the other correction on the other end.
Right,
Yeah,
you didn't have auto trigger, which this has. So
Right.
again, that's something to think about between now and the mid-month. Do you want to remove half of that trigger and say we want to get to 75? We're happy with a max of 100. We don't need to have more than a year's worth of expenditure sitting in our bank account, but leave that 50% trigger that says, we're below 50%, darn it, we need to get back up to at least that. And so just something to think about.
Yeah.
You can have the hard trigger 50%, and then that 75% as the goal, and not have that be a trigger for replenishment.
And that would be really part of our, assessment of tax rates too, because if all of a sudden we're running a large excess, but we're trying to achieve that 75, then we think twice about what we want to do with taxes with respect to lowering them or keeping them same, as an example.
Right.
So all that would come into play.
Right, and that's, yeah, Mayor, that's the point of that upper trigger. So we don't want to keep more of the taxpayers' money than we reasonably need to have to respond to
Right.
emergencies, yeah. So you have a pretty extensive internal control resolution, and these policies bring all of that into, again, into one policy document. So the current internal control resolution languages are all in here. Made some changes. The surplus property resolution, that particular language in that was a little concerning to me. So this policy addresses that. It really, the way that the disposal of property by policy was, or by resolution was allowed to happen is I could make a deal with Mr. Mooney to sell him a piece of surplus property. He and I just come up and make a deal. I don't want that authority. I don't think it's appropriate for anybody here to have that authority just to make a deal. So this really does require that it goes through a very public process to dispose of public assets. We use a service called GovDeals as a primary. It's an online auction. Chief Ackerman's the one that's been shepherding that for us. It doesn't cost us anything. The fees are borne by the people that are buying the asset. And again, it's very open, very transparent. I can't just make a deal. And I don't want to make deals like that with public's assets. So that's in these policies. And then Section 8 of this establishes a formal investment policy. This very closely mirrors, but does not exceed what you're allowed to do under North Carolina general statutes. So the statutes limit what we can invest money in. So we're not supposed to be speculating in the stock market. There's only certain instruments in which we can invest. Focuses the management of the portfolio. And again, in a higher interest rate environment, I would be spending time looking at our portfolio and looking at ways that we could maximize our return. The policies focus in order on safety, so the safety of the asset, so safety of principal, the liquidity, because we're not keeping the public's money to make money on it. We're keeping the public's money in case we need to respond to emergency, so it needs to be very liquid. And then the last criteria that we look at is yield. So safety, liquidity, and yield in that order. Right now, it doesn't make any sense for me to spend any time managing a portfolio when you're getting 0.01% on a significant investment. But again, just establishes a policy and gives guidelines to your current finance officer and then whoever might be coming in the future. This is what we're comfortable investing in. There were some things that that the state allows us to invest in that I didn't put in there, and I can, if you want me to bore you at some point with what those are, I'd be happy to. I don't want to take your time tonight to do that. Again, just I don't feel that they're appropriate investments, although they are legal and appropriate maybe for some larger units. We just don't need it here. And lastly, we'll get to bore you with this every 3 years. So once the policies are in place, every 3 years, it requires the council then sitting to review the policies to be sure that they're still comfortable with them.
You know, you talk about triggers. If we go through a budgeting cycle and a trigger is an issue, I think that would call for a rework of the policy.
Right. So, and I think that's one of the reasons that I'm really recommending that we look to adopt something in April saying this is the policy that we like now with an effective date of July. That will get us through the rest of the budget season. At that point I can say, yeah, we're going to exceed these policies. How about we change it before it gets into effect? But meaning I wanted to get this to you I know it was a lot of reading, and I'm sorry, but I think it just...
Apologize, this is all
Yeah, it was
important
great.
stuff.
It makes sense for where we are as in quotes, as a business. We need to have these kind of policies in place just to give you comfort as the fiduciaries, but also to give the public comfort that you're paying attention, and we do have policies that you're going to be holding your finance officer accountable to.
Thank you.
Great. I think it's excellent.
Yeah, I do
Excellent.
too.
You know.
Yeah, thank you.
Good piece of work.
Mr. Whitman, did you have any questions, sir?
He's awake.
You can see the top of his head.
The top of his head.
Wake up.
Okay, thanks, sir. Good to see you.
Good to be seen. All right, moving on to item number 10. Thank you, Drew, by the way. The mayor's agenda. The chairman, mayors, and others' biweekly COVID-19 meetings continue. I think perhaps as we head into May, we may suspend those and only meet on an emergency basis, but we still have them scheduled out through April, and they are useful. And of course, most of it now is versus an update on cases, more of an update on the vaccines and next steps with respect to where we're going as a state. I have a lot of league activity coming up this month. I have the board executive committee meetings, one tomorrow and one on Monday on various subjects. I have a finance committee meeting on April 13th, as does Drew, because he's also on the finance committee, and you can see why. We also have a board of directors meeting on April 20th. Once again, Drew and I will both be tied up in that. And of course, I'll remind everybody that the annual conference, City Vision 2021, is virtual again this year and will be held the 21st and the 22nd. And you should take a look at the topics. There may be some that, in fact, you actually want to go on and attend. That's one of the advantages of it being virtual. And I did send a letter out on this, and last month I was appointed to the North Carolina League of Municipalities Local Leadership Foundation Board. I didn't realize it was a 4-year obligation until I got appointed. But and then we had our first organization meeting. Actually, the foundation is one of 5 corporations under the league umbrella. The league is one. They have the 3 insurance pools, and then they have the foundation within their umbrella. And it was formed back in 2005 or 2007, I'm not sure which, but it's been pretty stagnant over the last couple of years, and they want to put new life into it. So our challenge this year is going to be basically to bring it back and make it more of a worthwhile foundation for the league and focusing on education and advocacy. And as it would be in the first meeting, I was elected president. Everybody stepped back, and I didn't see everybody stepping back. So I will be president of the foundation for the next year. It's a 13-member board. There's 9 appointed members and then 4 ex officio. And it's a pretty powerful board. It includes the dean of the School of Government for, Chapel Hill. It's got the assistant secretary of the Department of Commerce for the state. It's got a state senator on there, one other mayor. There's the CFO from Volvo Finance. There's one of the top lawyers from Dominion, North Carolina. There's the director of Wake Health Services. So it's a pretty powerful board, and hopefully that we'll be able to accomplish what we're looking to accomplish this year, the biggest thing being the challenge of raising funds for the foundation. We have 2 grant applications out now, and it actually does have a pretty good general fund balance going into the year. So that will keep me busy as well as a few other things. So that's my update for tonight. And with that, we'll start our council member updates, starting with Mayor Pro Tem Monica Thibodeau.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the work we have seen from all the staff tonight. Thank you very much. Really a lot going on, ramping up for a busy summer. The only thing I have to report is that I attended Finance and Budget meeting for the Visitors Bureau, sit on the assistant treasurer on the board, and they've done some fairly good budgeting, I think, for, budget proposal for the full board approval next week, going for a 7% increase generally, but that's because they didn't account for a lot of things last year. They budgeted way conservatively last year, so they're kind of making up for things this year. But looks like a strong year, obviously, for tourism ahead, and good opportunities with the Soundside Event Center making some changes, to working with the town of Nags Head to acquire all the property for the Visitors Board to own it, and just some really good things ahead for the Visitors Bureau. They seem to be doing really, really well. So I'm delighted to be back on that board for a while, and that's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Monica. Councilmember Mooney?
Nothing from me.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Well, I want to say a couple of thanks and a couple of shout outs. April's a busy month. If everybody's been following the town's social media accounts, everybody should know that April's, in addition to being Child Abuse Prevention Month, it's also National Volunteer Awareness Month, and Betsy's been doing a great job putting out posts and inspirational quotes and thoughts about volunteerism here in town, which really is the backbone of town. And this month has just been chocked full of all sorts of awareness weeks. There's been awareness about firefighter cancer and 911 operators. I think today is National Walking Day, but this week is also National Public Health Week. And I just thought it was interesting that today's focus is strengthening communities. And one of the messages that the American Public Health Association is trying to get out to elected leaders like us is that we never forget that the decisions that we make or don't make do have a direct impact on people's health and well-being. And I just think as public servants that we need to remember that, the decisions that we make about improving our pedestrian infrastructure has an impact on people's well-beings. Decisions that we make about inclusivity and diversity, has an impact on people's mental health. So it's just, there's not as much information out there about Public Health Week as some of the other awareness campaigns, but that is happening this week. I just wanted to bring our attention to that for a moment.
Great.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. Councilmember Whitman?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you, Sandy. Going on to item number 12. Are there any additional public comments that came in? No, sir. And we have one audience out there. Would you like to make any public comments? You're welcome, by the way. Thank you. All right, with that, we're going to go into closed session. I'm going to ask, we're going to have two separate closed sessions this evening. I'm going to ask Mayor Pro Tem if she'd read the motion for the first one.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to enter in closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3 and 6 in order to confer with the town attorney regarding a matter within the attorney-client privilege and to preserve that privilege and to discuss confidential personnel matter in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 160A-168, including but not limited to considering the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual public officer or employee.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor? There being none, we'll do a roll call vote to go into closed session. Mayor votes aye. Mayor Pro Tem
Aye.
Thibodeau?
Aye.
Councilmember Mooney?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Whitman? Aye. We are now in closed session.
Thank you, Philip.
Okay, we are now out of closed session. I'm going to ask Town Attorney Robert Hobbs to give us an update.
Thank you. The first closed session, the council received advice from the town attorney, which is protected by attorney-client privilege. And then from the second, and otherwise, nothing to report further. With regard to the second closed session, there was no action taken or needed from that closed session.
Thank you, Robert. Is there any other action to come before council this evening? There being none, the next scheduled meeting will be the mid-month meeting on Wednesday, April 21st, 2021 at 1 p.m. With that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned.